If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 281, Final Days Part 2. The stands filled quickly, with students proudly displaying their school colors. Fleur, sitting with her Beauxbatons classmates, caught Harry's eye and blew him a kiss, even as she wore her school's colors in support of the opposition. Lee Jordan, who couldn't resist the opportunity to commentate one last time, grabbed his magical megaphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever tri-school exhibition match. And what a lineup we have today." The game began with explosive intensity. The combined team's chasers, led by a talented Durmstrang 7th year, launched an immediate attack on the Hogwarts goals. They moved with impressive speed, the quaffle a red blur between them. But they hadn't counted on Harry's reflexes. Their first shot, a clever reverse pass that would have scored against most keepers, was plucked out of the air as if Harry had known exactly where it would be. Their second attempt, a powerful throw to the lowest hoop, met the same fate. "Impossible save by Potter!" Lee shouted. "Did he just catch that one-handed while hanging upside down? Is that even legal?" The Hogwarts chasers quickly took full advantage of Harry's impressive defense. Realizing that he could handle the goal on his own, they focused entirely on scoring. Angelina, Alicia, and Roger executed plays they'd perfected over years of practice. Their formations were flawless, their passing precise, and their shooting deadly accurate. Johnson to spin it to Davies, score. Another 10 points to Hogwarts. That's 60-0, and we're only 15 minutes in. Above the main action, Krum and Cedric circled like hawks. The Bulgarian seeker was clearly toying with his less experienced opponent, occasionally feinting into spectacular dives that had the crowd gasping. The Weasley twins, meanwhile, were putting on a show of their own. They'd bewitched their bloodjares to trail sparkles, turning each hit into a fireworks display. Even the opposing team's beaters had to applaud some of their more creative shots. And there goes Fred, or is it George? With another spectacular bludger. Look at those colors. If professional Quidditch doesn't work out, they could have a future in magical pyrotechnics. As the game progressed, the skill gap between the teams became increasingly apparent, but not in the way most had expected. While Krum clearly outclassed Cedric in the seeker position, the Hogwarts chasers were putting on a master class in teamwork. And there's another brilliant interception by Johnson. Lee's commentary echoed across the pitch. "Look at that formation, they're running the Hawks' head attacking formation. No wait, it's morphed into a reverse Porskov ploy." Score: 110-0 to Hogwarts. The visiting team's frustration mounted with each failed attempt at scoring. Harry's keeping was beyond anything they'd expected, his style unlike traditional keepers. He didn't just defend the hoops, he seemed to control the entire defensive zone. "Potter's not just stopping goals," Lee observed excitedly, "he's directing the entire defense. Look how he's positioning himself to force the chasers into the twins' firing range." The score mounted, 120-0, then 140-0. Krum, realizing their only chance lay in catching the snitch quickly, stopped toying with Cedric and began hunting in earnest. Krum spotted something. Lee shouted. "He's diving, and this time it's no feint. Diggory's trying to catch up, but that firebolt's in a league of its own." The crowd rose to their feet as Krum streaked downward, Cedric trailing hopelessly behind. The snitch gleamed just above the grass, and there was never any doubt about the outcome. Krum's fingers closed around the golden ball with typical flourish. Krum catches the snitch. 150 points to the combined team. Lee announced. "But wait, what's the final score?" "Ladies and gentlemen, despite Krum's spectacular catch, Hogwarts wins 160-150. The power of teamwork prevails." The teams descended amid thunderous applause. Even Krum looked impressed as he shook hands with the Hogwarts players. "You fly well," he told Harry gruffly. "Should have been seeker." Harry smiled. It was a friendly game. Sometimes it's more fun to help others score than to grab all the glory yourself. The post-match celebrations carried on through dinner, momentarily pushing aside the darker events of the past week. Students from all three schools mingled freely, exchanging addresses and promises to keep in touch. As evening fell, Harry found himself alone with Fleur in their usual spot on the astronomy tower. The castle glowed softly in the twilight, its windows twinkling like earthbound stars. "You know," Fleur said softly, breaking their comfortable silence on the astronomy tower, "you promised to show me something special in ZE Castle." A special secret room, you said. Harry raised an eyebrow, though his eyes twinkled with mischief. Did I? You said it was. How did you put it? Magical even for Hogwarts. She leaned against him, her silver hair catching the moonlight. Tonight is my last night here, and I don't think I will ever return. I don't want to miss the chance to see this special room. Well then, Harry stood, offering his hand with an elegant bow, shall we explore one last Hogwarts secret? They made their way through the quiet corridors, their footsteps echoing softly against ancient stone. Moonlight streamed through high windows, casting their shadows in elongated patterns across the floor. The castle seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the significance of this final night. Reaching the 7th floor, Harry led them to the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. Watch carefully, he instructed, beginning his 3 passes. Fleur gasped softly as an ornate door materialized from the stone. The dark wood was intricately carved with patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. After you, Harry gestured, and Fleur stepped through, only to freeze in wonderment. The room had transformed into an exact replica of the French dueling arena where they'd first met. Every detail was perfect, from the marble columns to the gilded observation galleries. Even the lighting was identical, warm golden rays streaming through high windows that couldn't possibly exist within Hogwarts. This brings back memories, Fleur said softly, running her hand along a familiar railing. The place where I was defeated so thoroughly. Where I taught an overconfident witch who relied too much on her allure a valuable lesson, Harry teased, though his tone was gentle. I was not overconfident. Fleur protested, then laughed. Well, perhaps a little. But let's not dwell on my old self. I like to think I've grown since then. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the perfect recreation. This room can become anything. Harry demonstrated by summoning training dummies and conjuring ancient tomes. It becomes whatever you need, he explained. Though it can't create food or break Gamp's laws. And anything conjured here must stay here. The room provides whatever you need. Fleur's eyes sparkled with growing understanding, a mischievous smile playing at her lips. Would you like to try? Harry asked, moving toward the door. Fleur's voice held a note that made Harry's heart skip. Wait outside. Raising an eyebrow, Harry complied. The door vanished behind him, and he watched as Fleur paced deliberately, her expression concentrated. When the door reappeared, it was different, darker wood, with intricate carvings of roses and vines. Harry's breath caught as he followed her inside. The room had transformed into an elegant bedroom that somehow combined both French and magical aesthetics. Floating candles cast a warm glow over midnight blue silk hangings. A trail of rose petals led toward a massive 4-poster bed, its dark wood matching the door's carvings. Fleur. Harry began, but found himself silenced by her finger against his lips. Non, she whispered, her blue eyes dark with emotion. No more words, Harry. Just us. As their lips met, the floating candles dimmed of their own accord. The room of requirement, understanding perfectly what they needed, ensured their privacy, sealing them in their own private world for one last magical night at Hogwarts. Chapter 282, Twilight of an Eventful Year. The sun hadn't yet risen over Hogwarts when Harry Potter, still wearing yesterday's robes and sporting a rather suspicious grin, attempted to sneak into the Ravenclaw dormitory. He was almost to his bed when Roger's voice shattered the silence. And where exactly have you been, Mr. Potter? Harry froze, turning to see not only Roger but Reggie as well, both sitting up in their beds with identical, knowing grins. Why are you two up so early? Harry asked, attempting to feign casualness. Usually, you're barely awake before classes. Reggie chuckled. Oh, we were asleep. But we set an alert ward by the stairs to let us know when you'd come sneaking back. Harry mentally scolded himself. He hadn't expected anyone to put an alert charm in the Ravenclaw dorms. Why would you do that? Roger raised an eyebrow, looking every bit as mischievous as Reggie. We're the ones asking questions here, Harry. Where were you last night? Harry kept his tone casual. I was training. With everything going on, I don't want to waste a moment, got to get as strong as possible. Interesting, Roger drawled, his eyes glinting. Because someone mentioned a certain silver-haired champion was missing from her dorm as well. You wouldn't happen to know where she was, would you? Harry smirked. Fleur? Yeah, she was training with me. Can't exactly spar alone, can I? Reggie leaned forward, his grin widening. Just training, or was there more to it? Harry sighed, exasperated. What's with all the questions? I need to get ready for my morning session. Ask me later, we've got the whole day. With that, Harry quickly changed into his training clothes and left the room before they could continue their interrogation. At breakfast, Roger and Reggie looked ready to renew their questions, possibly with reinforcements, but a new topic of conversation swept through the hall, and they were temporarily distracted. Charles Potter had been released from the hospital wing. He was back to his usual self, having recovered from his encounter and exposure to the Cruciatus curse. The Great Hall buzzed with curiosity when Harry and his dorm mates arrived for breakfast. Students from all houses and schools craned their necks toward the entrance, waiting for the first sight of Charles. The whispers flew fast. I heard he fought you-know-who in a proper duel. Don't be daft, he's dead. The whispers only grew as Charles entered, flanked by Ron and Hermione like personal guards. Ginny and Neville followed close behind, forming a protective circle. Charles looked pale but determined, seemingly unbothered by the attention. Before the rumors could take off again, Dumbledore stood up at the staff table. While we all share concern for Mr. Potter's well-being, he announced, his blue eyes somehow managing to meet every student's gaze simultaneously, I must ask that you respect his privacy and refrain from overwhelming him with questions. When and if Mr. Potter wishes to share his experience, that will be his choice. Dumbledore's words had the intended effect, and the direct questions ceased, though not quite as intended. Instead of open stares and inquiries, students now observed Charles from behind books, around corners and through gaps between friends, with whispered theories growing more elaborate. Charles seemed to shy away from the attention now, preferring to spend his time at Hagrid's cabin with his close friends. Harry couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for his younger brother. The once arrogant boy, always eager to be in the spotlight, had matured into someone humble and grounded, content to stay out of the center of attention. Everything Charles had been through at Hogwarts had changed him for the better, and Harry was genuinely impressed with how bravely he had handled himself during his encounter with Voldemort. The rest of the day passed in a strange mixture of end-of-term excitement and subdued grief. The empty seats at the Slytherin table were a constant reminder of recent losses. Several students had left early, summoned home by family. Draco had departed with his mother days before. Harry spent the afternoon with his friends by the lake, Fleur nestled comfortably in his arms. Their relationship had shifted subtly but significantly after the previous night, a new certainty underlying every touch and glance. Their friends, to their credit, kept the teasing to a minimum, mostly. So, Arabella asked innocently, how was last night's training? It was great, Fleur replied before Harry could, her eyes sparkling. We trained for hours. Very enlightening. I'm still sore from it all. Roger choked on his pumpkin juice while Cedric fell backwards laughing. Even the Elvinia, usually so composed, couldn't help giggling. As evening approached, the castle's atmosphere shifted. The final feast awaited, but it would be different this year. Black banners hung along the walls, and the enchanted ceiling displayed a clear night sky, stars twinkling against velvet darkness. Thousands of candles cast a warm glow, but the mood was somber. Students filed in, their usual end-of-term excitement tempered by the events of the past week. The Slytherin table, normally proud and aloof, sat in unusual solidarity, many of its members wearing black armbands. Even the ghosts seemed more solemn, floating silently above the tables. When everyone was seated, Dumbledore rose. The hall fell silent immediately, every eye fixed on the headmaster. His customary end-of-term twinkle was absent, replaced by something deeper, more serious. Another year has gone, Dumbledore began, his voice carrying to every corner. And what a year it has been! A year that began with the excitement of the Triwizard Tournament, yet ends in shadow. We have witnessed incredible displays of magical prowess, celebrated international cooperation, and forged bonds between our schools that will last lifetimes. His expression grew more serious. But we have also faced darkness. Lord Voldemort has returned. A collective shudder ran through the hall at the name. Several students gasped audibly. It would be an insult to you all to pretend otherwise. Charles Potter faced him in that graveyard, displaying courage beyond his years. He escaped, thanks to the intervention of an unknown wizard, but not before witnessing horrors no child should endure. Dumbledore's eyes found Charles at the Gryffindor table. His experience reminds us that dark times approach. Yet it also shows us that even in our darkest moments, help can arrive from unexpected quarters. We have also suffered losses. Several of our students have lost fathers, deaths that the ministry may classify differently, but whose absence will be felt deeply regardless. While some may choose to ignore the truth of these losses, we cannot ignore the pain they have caused. His gaze swept the hall, lingering particularly on the Slytherin table. In the coming darkness, we must remember that we are strongest together. House rivalries, school competitions, and even old prejudices must give way before the bonds of shared humanity. Those who seek to divide us will find that their actions only give us more reason to unite. Remember those we have lost. Comfort those who grieve. Stand firm against the encroaching dark. And above all, keep your hearts open to love, for it is love that will light our way forward. Love that gives us strength to face whatever darkness may come. The silence that followed was profound. Harry noticed more than a few students wiping their eyes, while others reached out to clasp hands across house tables. After the feast, it was time for Beauxbatons and Durmstrang to depart. Unlike in the canon, both schools had decided to leave that very night. Harry wasn't entirely sure why, but he guessed that with the nearly confirmed return of Voldemort and the deaths of Death Eaters, the other ministries might have acted quickly, calling their students back to learn all they could about the dark events that had unfolded. The night was clear and cool as students gathered on the grounds. The massive carriage and ship stood ready, but neither group seemed eager to leave. As students said their goodbyes, Fleur pulled Harry aside. "Remember, Harry," she said, her voice carrying that melodious accent he loved, "you are mine now." Her eyes sparkled mischievously. "Don't you dare forget it." "As if I could," Harry replied softly, pulling her close. And if any English girls try to steal you?" She left the threat hanging playfully. "Get a room," Roger called out, then quickly dodged Harry's wandless stinging hex. "Already did," Fleur whispered with a wicked smile, just loud enough for their friends to hear, causing several eyebrows to shoot up and setting off another round of laughter. Their final goodbye was interrupted by Madame Maxime calling for her students. As Fleur turned to leave, she pressed something into Harry's hand, a delicate silver chain with a tiny charm shaped like a thunderbird. "To remind you," she said softly, then kissed him one last time before hurrying to join her schoolmates. Harry watched as the massive carriage rose into the night sky, followed shortly by the Durmstrang ship submerging beneath the lake's dark surface. The remaining Hogwarts students drifted back inside, leaving Harry alone with his thoughts. Tomorrow, he would leave for home. Summer would be hectic, but some things, he thought, were worth fighting for. Chapter 283, Return to the Black Castle. The Hogwarts Express steamed away from the station, a scarlet blur against the emerald countryside. Harry stood on the platform, watching until the last wisps of smoke disappeared over the horizon. Cedric, Roger, Reggie, and the rest had all departed with promises to write soon and plans to meet up over the summer. Now, standing alone, he felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The quiet was a welcome change after the chaotic end of term, but he knew it wouldn't last. Turning away from the empty tracks, Harry made his way home to the Black Castle. There waiting for him was what promised to be another summer of training. The Grand Hall was just as Harry remembered, ornate tapestries depicting the Black family history, suits of armor lining the walls, and the ever-present warmth that made it feel like home. The flickering torches cast a golden glow, highlighting the intricate details of the castle's storied past. "Welcome back, Harry," a voice called out from the entrance. Harry turned to see Arcturus Black approaching, his tall figure clad in dark robes that seemed to absorb the fading light. Harry smiled faintly. "It is good to be back. It was a hectic year." "Where is Sirius?" Arcturus sighed. "Caught up at the ministry, I'm afraid. The aftermath of the events of the Triwizard Tournament has everyone scrambling. He sends his apologies." Harry nodded. "I figured as much. He's going to be busy for some time." As Harry neared the doors, a pop sounded, and Myra appeared, her tiny form emerging from a concealed spot. "Welcome back, Master Harry," greeted Myra with a warm smile. "Thank you, Myra. It's good to be back in your care," Harry replied, feeling the familiar sense of comfort her presence provided. Arcturus observed Harry keenly, his piercing blue eyes seeming to look right through him. "You seem different," he remarked as they made their way to the sitting room. "Do I?" Harry asked lightly, though he could sense where this was heading. "Indeed. There's a weight on your shoulders that wasn't there before," Arcturus noted, settling into an armchair. Harry took a seat opposite him. "It's been an eventful year." Arcturus's eyes bore into him. Eventful, yes. But I suspect there's more to it than that. Harry met his gaze steadily but said nothing. After a moment, Arcturus sighed. You can drop the act, Harry. I know. Know what? Harry asked cautiously. That you were the mysterious wizard who saved Charles, fought Voldemort, and decimated his Death Eaters, Arcturus stated plainly. Harry's composure faltered for a split second before he composed himself. What makes you think that? Arcturus gave a wry smile. You're not the first Potter to take such bold actions. Your great-grandfather, Charles Potter, was much the same. The style, the strategy, it all points to you. Realizing there was no point in denying it, Harry leaned back. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you figured it out. Arcturus nodded. You're becoming quite the formidable wizard. But such actions carry heavy consequences. Do you disapprove? Harry asked carefully. On the contrary, Arcturus replied. In times of war, difficult choices must be made. You did what you thought was right, and I respect that. However, the loss of so many pure-blood wizards, misguided as they were, is regrettable. Harry looked down, feeling a pang of guilt. I didn't take any pleasure in it. But they chose their path, and without them, Voldemort will be much weaker in the coming war. Indeed, Arcturus agreed. Let us hope their families can find a better way forward. There was a moment of silence before Harry spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. So, you'll keep this between us? It is not good for even Sirius to know, at least not yet. Of course, Arcturus assured him. It's not my place to reveal your secrets. Besides, we have more pressing matters to attend to. Harry's eyes lit up with a mix of relief and determination. Does that mean we can begin my training in the dark arts? I need to be prepared for whatever Voldemort throws at me next. I tried to finish Voldemort that night, but he escaped. Arcturus held up a hand. Patience, Harry. Your training will continue in due time. But first, we must focus on the upcoming Wisen gamat meeting. Harry blinked. The Wisen gamat? Yes, Arcturus confirmed. In light of recent events, an emergency session has been called. As the new Lord Potter, you are expected to attend. Harry frowned, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. I had never paid any attention to how the Ministry of Magic worked. It looks like there are some things I am still clueless about. Arcturus leaned back, his expression contemplative. Claiming your title grants you a seat on the Wisen gamat. It's time you learned how to navigate the political arena. Harry sighed, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Politics wasn't exactly what I had in mind for the summer. I thought of a future in politics, but not this soon. Very few young men dream of joining politics, Arcturus said with a chuckle, though his eyes remained serious. But it's a necessary part of our world. Power isn't wielded only with a wand. All right, Harry conceded. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, Arcturus replied. I will begin with the basics and help you identify key figures in the Wisen gamat. You'll need to be well prepared. Understood, Harry said, his resolve solidifying. I'll do whatever it takes. Good, Arcturus said approvingly. Now, get some rest. You'll need a clear mind. As Harry made his way to his room, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had heard only bad things about being in politics in his previous life and had no other knowledge of it. This was going to be a challenge, but he was determined to rise to it. Meanwhile, in a shadowed chamber far from the Black Castle, Lord Voldemort seethed with rage. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from flickering candles that cast sinister shadows on the stone walls. Around him stood a handful of Death Eaters, their dark cloaks enveloping them like wraiths awaiting their master's command. Voldemort paced back and forth, his serpentine eyes gleaming with fury. How could it come to this? He hissed, his voice echoing menacingly. I have returned, and already I have suffered a significant loss. That insolent wizard escaped only because I had just been resurrected and was not at full power. If he dares to face me again, I will show him why people fear to even speak my name. The assembled Death Eaters remained silent, their gazes fixed on the cold stone floor. None dared to interrupt their Dark Lord's tirade. Explain to me, Voldemort snarled, his gaze piercing each of them in turn, where were you when I summoned everyone? I could have used your talents there, Greyback. With your senses, that interloper could not have appeared so suddenly before me. Fenrir Greyback stepped forward, his feral eyes reflecting the dim light. "My lord, I was outside the country and could not return swiftly enough. I accept any punishment you see fit." Voldemort's lip curled in disdain. "Yes, but count yourself fortunate that you are needed right now. I will deal with your failings after I have dispatched that meddlesome brat. If only I knew who he was." Greyback bowed his head. "My lord, I can command the werewolves to be on the lookout for that wizard." Voldemort's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Good. See to it. Find him, and inform me immediately. I want him captured so I can exact proper revenge for what he did." Greyback nodded eagerly, his expression one of savage anticipation. "Yes, my lord." Voldemort then turned his gaze to Severus Snape, who stood with his head slightly bowed, his face a mask of composure. "And you, Severus? How fortunate you are to have avoided the fate of the others." Snape met his gaze briefly. "My lord, I was unable to respond to your summons without arousing Dumbledore's suspicion. He keeps a close watch on me." Voldemort regarded him with cold scrutiny. "Your loyalty has always been complex." "I am ever your servant," Snape replied smoothly, his voice devoid of emotion. "See that you are," Voldemort warned, his tone icy. "I will require your expertise in potions to restore my strength fully." "Of course, my lord," Snape agreed with a deferential nod. Resuming his pacing, Voldemort's expression darkened further. "Our losses have been substantial. With so many of my faithful gone, we cannot strike as openly as before. The Ministry refuses to believe I have returned, which works to our advantage for now. The recent incidents have diminished the fear wizards once held for me. We must lie low, strengthen our numbers discreetly, and then strike when the Ministry is utterly unprepared." Greyback snarled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Let me bring you the werewolves. They have no love for the Ministry. They will fight for you." "And the giants," another Death Eater suggested tentatively. "They could be swayed to our cause." Voldemort dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "Tempting, but without sufficient resources, we cannot offer them what they desire. Gold, freedom, these things require influence we currently lack." Another Death Eater stepped forward, a dark wizard whose name was whispered with fear in the hidden corners of the wizarding world. "My lord, there is a faction of dark wizards who have remained hidden, who fight for the same cause as us. They might be persuaded to join our ranks." Voldemort's interest was piqued. "Oh? Tell me more." As Voldemort leaned in, the air thickened with anticipation, hinting at alliances waiting to emerge from the darkest corners of the wizarding world. Chapter 284, The Ministry and the Wisen Gamat. The following morning dawned clear and crisp over the Black Castle. Harry awoke early, the events of the previous day still fresh in his mind. Determined to face the challenges ahead, he dressed swiftly and made his way to the library, where Arcturus awaited him with a stack of parchment and several thick tomes spread out on a large wooden table. "Good morning, Harry," Arcturus greeted, his tone professional yet not unkind. "Good morning, grandfather," Harry replied, taking a seat opposite his mentor. "I'm ready to start." Arcturus nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Today, we will delve into the structure and functions of the Ministry of Magic, as well as the role of the Wisen Gamat. Understanding these institutions is crucial for your upcoming responsibilities." Harry leaned forward, eager to absorb the knowledge. "Where should we begin?" "Let's start with an overview of the Ministry of Magic," Arcturus said, gesturing to the first tome. The Ministry is the main governing body of the magical community in Great Britain, which includes England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Established in 1707, it succeeded the Wizards' Council and has been pivotal in maintaining the International Statute of Wizarding secrecy since 1692. Harry nodded, his quill poised over his notebook, ready to capture every detail. Its primary role is to preserve magical law and act as a liaison between the British government and the wizarding world. The Ministry is headquartered underground, beneath the Home Treasury in Whitehall in London. This location helps keep its operations hidden from Muggles. "Does the Muggle side know anything about us? Is there any contact?" Harry asked, glancing up from the book. "Ah, yes. Technically, the Ministry is under the Muggle Queen," Arcturus explained, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "However, most of our people pay that detail little mind. The Minister for Magic is in contact with the Muggle Prime Minister, and these relationships are part of why the Statute of Secrecy has held strong for so long. Keeping them informed means keeping the peace." "So they're in on it," Harry mused, surprised yet somewhat impressed. Doesn't that make the Muggles nervous? I mean, there are powerful wizards who could threaten them. Has no evil wizard tried to attack the Queen or the Prime Minister? Many throughout history, Arcturus replied thoughtfully. But there is a special family of wizards tasked with protecting the Queen and the royal family, though not much is known about them to the public. They, along with the Muggle government, also rope in many Muggleborns who leave the wizarding world after graduating from Hogwarts to protect their people. Harry raised an eyebrow. So, Muggleborns working for the Muggle government, with wizarding knowledge, could they ever be a threat to us? You know the Muggleborns must hate the wizarding world for the way they were treated here. Arcturus's expression turned sour. Some might say they already are. Others feel that an army of Muggleborns poses no threat to us at all. But it is wise to be vigilant, he added. Seems risky to assume they'd never be a threat, Harry replied thoughtfully, jotting this down. I'll need to pay more attention to them in the future. This could become a big problem. Arcturus nodded approvingly, a spark of pride in his eye. Good that you understand. I've tried for years to make other lords see this danger, but they won't listen. We need to protect the magical world from all sides. Let's move to the next topic. Harry shifted in his seat, trying to process everything. The Wisen gamat. Yes, let's discuss the Wisen gamat. It's our high court and legislative body, Arcturus explained, drawing Harry's focus back. It dates back to the medieval Wizards' Council, even before the ministry itself. Harry could almost picture it ancient wizards gathering in cloaked secrecy, convening to pass laws and discuss magical issues. He imagined them like a powerful court that could rival the governments of any Muggle state. During its formation, Arcturus continued, several influential pureblood families joined together to form the Wisen gamat. The Blacks, Potters, Longbottoms, and a few others of that time. Each family was given a hereditary seat, a tradition that continues to this day. So these seats, they're passed down through families? Harry asked, trying to grasp the full meaning of the Wisen gamat's power. Precisely, Arcturus affirmed. Each family in the Wisen gamat holds its seat as a birthright. But should a family line end, or should they be expelled for a serious crime, the seat doesn't simply vanish. What happens then? Harry asked. Arcturus leaned back, steepling his fingers. When a seat is vacant, a new candidate is chosen. But it isn't an open election, only purebloods with significant contributions to the magical community are considered. The other members of the Wisen gamat review their achievements, conduct, and lineage before deciding. That's a lot of power for a small group of families, Harry noted, thinking of how this concentration of authority felt oddly feudal, like ancient noble houses who ruled without checks. The minister, the Wisen gamat, it's all under the same few people. Arcturus nodded solemnly. It is. The Wisen gamat holds significant influence over magical law and governance. Harry's pen paused as he thought of the implications. Do the votes of the founding families and the new families have the same weight in voting? Technically, yes, Arcturus confirmed. But there are alliances and such, so some families are more powerful than others. So I have only one vote, Harry stated, understanding the dynamics. Yes, one vote, and you must use it wisely, Arcturus advised. Now, let's move on. We should discuss the process of selecting the minister and the ministry's heads. The minister for magic, Arcturus explained, is not elected by the magical populace. The election is handled within the ministry, primarily by department heads and the Wisen gamat. So, nothing like the Muggle election? Harry asked, trying to understand the nuances. Precisely, Arcturus said. It relies on influence, alliances, and internal politics. This may seem unrepresentative, but it ensures leaders have the expertise to navigate our world's complexities. And the department heads? Harry asked, picturing a cabinet or council. They're appointed based on expertise, but the minister has a major say in the final choice, Arcturus replied. However, senior members often weigh in to keep the process balanced. So the Wisen gamat is a kind of oversight for everything, even the minister's actions. Harry clarified. More or less, Arcturus replied. The Wisen gamat is the higher court. But most cases are handled by a different body, the Council of Magical Law. Harry was intrigued. What does the Council of Magical Law do? The Council is a judicial body, subordinate to the Wisen gamat, Arcturus replied. It's responsible for overseeing criminal cases and reviewing information from convicted criminals. Essentially, they ensure the laws of our world are upheld. It sounds complex, but surprisingly organized, Harry remarked, impressed by the structured governance. Indeed, Arcturus said with a nod. Our world's laws and governance are intricate, born of centuries of tradition and the need to safeguard our way of life. Harry rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the information. It's a lot to take in, and I have to jump into this quagmire in a couple of days. Where do I start? Arcturus smiled encouragingly. We'll begin by identifying key figures within the Wisen gamat and understanding their interests and alliances. It's important to build a network of trusted allies and be aware of potential adversaries. We'll also cover the legislative process, from drafting bills to debating and enacting laws. Harry nodded, though his heart wasn't in it. For all its grandeur, this world of politics and ancient tradition felt burdensome. The political maneuvering and cold calculation felt as appealing as diving into icy water. But with Voldemort's inevitable return looming on the horizon, he knew he didn't have the luxury of avoiding it. As the day progressed, they practiced mock scenarios, with Arcturus posing as various Wisen gamat members, challenging Harry to respond appropriately to different situations. Despite his growing competence, each successful interaction only reinforced how foreign this all felt to him. He would rather be practicing battle magic or spending time with his friends than learning the intricacies of political alliances. This is going to be challenging, he admitted finally, but I know it's necessary. You're showing great aptitude, Harry, Arcturus praised. With continued training, you'll become a formidable presence within the Wisen gamat. Remember, knowledge and diplomacy are just as powerful as any spell. Harry managed a small smile, grateful for his mentor's guidance even as he wrestled with his reluctance. Thank you, grandfather. I couldn't ask for a better teacher in this. Arcturus returned the smile, a hint of pride in his eyes. You're very welcome. Now, get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll delve deeper into the legislative process and explore case studies of significant Wisen gamat decisions. As night fell over the Black Castle, Harry retired to his quarters, the day's lessons replaying in his mind. The intricacies of the ministry and the Wisen gamat were complex, and despite his dislike for politics, he knew he had to master them. With Voldemort growing in power, the world would need leaders who understood both the fight ahead and the hidden forces that could help or hinder it. As much as he resisted, he had to step into this role. For his own sake and for the world he was fighting to protect. Chapter 285, The Wisen gamat Meeting. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the Black Castle as Harry stood by the grand entrance, waiting for Sirius. His formal robes, bearing the subtle yet unmistakable markings of the Potter lordship, felt heavy on his shoulders, though whether from the material or the weight of responsibility, he couldn't tell. Today marked his first step into wizarding politics, his debut as Lord Potter, and he was determined to make it count. A distant pop signaled Sirius's arrival just beyond the castle's protective wards. Harry watched as his godfather approached, his black robes billowing lightly in the summer breeze. Sirius's face was a mix of pride and concern. Ready for this, Harry? Sirius asked, placing a reassuring hand on his godson's shoulder. Harry nodded, managing a small smile. As ready as I'll ever be. Although it will be quite awkward being with all you old people. Sirius's bark-like laugh echoed across the grounds. Old? I assure you, pup, I am still young and outrun any of my colleagues in the Auror department. Though I still agree the Wisen gamat meeting can be boring. However, today promises to be a little exciting due to the subject about to be discussed. As they walked toward the apparition point, Harry's expression grew serious. Talking about the subject, how are things at the ministry? Sirius sighed, his earlier mirth fading. Tense. The aftermath of the third task has everyone on edge. Fudge is doing his best to downplay it, but not everyone is convinced. And there is also the fact that many people had to be replaced due to the ministry officials lost that night. Tensions are high. Harry's brow furrowed. Hopefully the general audience sees sense and decides to act. We don't want to give Voldemort time to build up his forces. I hope so too, Sirius replied, his voice heavy with concern. The familiar squeeze of apparition deposited them at the gates of Bones Manor, where Amelia Bones stood waiting, her posture ramrod straight and her monocle glinting in the morning light. Good morning, Harry, she greeted, her tone professional but warm. It's good to see you. Good morning, Amelia, Harry replied respectfully. Where are Aries and Susan? Amelia's stern expression softened slightly. Asleep. First week of holidays, they spend their time playing till late in the night. Lucky them, Harry remarked dryly. I had to wake up early to argue with some old people. You learn to cope, Amelia responded, her lips twitching. We should get going. The meeting starts soon. The three of them proceeded to the fireplace inside the manor. We'll take the Fleur network to the ministry, Amelia explained. It's the most direct route. One by one, they stepped into the emerald flames, stating clearly, Ministry of Magic, Atrium. Harry felt the familiar whirl of colors and sounds before stepping out into the grand atrium of the ministry. The Fleur transported Harry to the atrium of the Ministry of Magic building, the impressive magical place where Dumbledore and Voldemort will fight in about a year if the plot follows the canon. The vast hall bustled with witches and wizards, the polished dark wood floors reflecting the golden statues that dominated the central fountain. Come along, Amelia beckoned, leading them through a series of corridors until they reached a large, ornate door marked with the crest of the Wisen gamat, guarded by stern-looking wizards. As they approached, the guards nodded respectfully. Madam Bones, Lord Black, Lord Potter, they acknowledged. The Wisen gamat chamber was an impressive sight. Rows of ascending benches formed a large semicircle around a central podium. High above, enchanted windows cast natural light into the room, despite being deep underground. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting significant moments in wizarding history. Harry felt a mixture of awe and apprehension as he followed Sirius and Amelia to the seating area. Lords and ladies of various wizarding families milled about, engaging in quiet conversations. Robes of rich fabrics and house colors added to the chamber's regal atmosphere. Harry, a voice called out warmly. Turning, Harry saw a tall man with kind eyes approaching. Lord Longbottom, Harry greeted with a smile. Frank Longbottom extended his hand warmly. Good to see you again. Thanks for helping Neville through his studies. He is your biggest fan and talks about your achievements all the time. I am jealous. Thank you, Lord Longbottom. Neville's a great friend, Harry replied earnestly. Sirius leaned in. Harry, there are a few people you should meet. They moved through the crowd, stopping before a group of distinguished-looking wizards. You should already know Lord Diggory, Sirius said. Yes, it is great to see you again, Lord Diggory, Harry responded. Lord Diggory smiled warmly. Likewise, Lord Potter. Cedric speaks highly of your recent adventures. You made Hogwarts and us proud by beating the other two schools in the Triwizard Tournament. And this is Lord Davies, Sirius continued. A dignified man with sharp features nodded politely. My son Roger speaks highly of you, Lord Potter. It's a pleasure to have you here. The pleasure is mine, Lord Davies, Harry responded, shaking his hand firmly. They moved on to meet Lord Thornwood, father of Arabella, and Lord Whitlock, father of Reggie and Elvinia. Both men greeted Harry warmly, expressing appreciation for the friendships their children shared with him. Welcome, Lord Potter, Thornwood said warmly. Your strengths and achievements are commendable. I hope we can work together to ensure the safety of our community. Whitlock nodded in agreement. It's always encouraging to see young wizards taking their responsibilities seriously. Finally, they approached a woman with a striking resemblance to Alicia Spinnet. Lord Potter, may I introduce Lady Spinnet, Sirius said. It's an honor to meet you, Harry said, bowing slightly. The honor is mine, she replied graciously. Alicia boasts of your Quidditch skills. Alicia is an excellent chaser herself, Harry responded diplomatically. As they took their seats, Harry felt a bit more at ease, having connected with familiar faces. He settled into the chair marked with the Potter crest, its ornate design a testament to his family's long-standing legacy. A hush fell over the chamber as Albus Dumbledore, the chief warlock, took his place at the central podium. His eyes scanned the assembly before settling momentarily on Harry. There was a flicker of something surprise, perhaps disappointment, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Harry couldn't help but smile inwardly. He knew Dumbledore had planned his grisly imprisonment precisely to prevent this moment Harry claiming his hereditary seat. Seeing the master manipulator's plans foiled brought him no small satisfaction. Esteemed members of the Wisen gamat, Dumbledore began, his voice resonating throughout the hall. Before we commence today's proceedings, I would like to acknowledge a new addition to our assembly. Hadrian Potter, Lord Potter, has taken his rightful place among us. A murmur rippled through the chamber as all eyes turned to Harry. He stood gracefully, offering a polite bow. Welcome, Lord Potter, Dumbledore continued, though his tone lacked its usual warmth. Polite applause echoed around the room before Harry retook his seat. As the applause died down, Dumbledore signaled for everyone to take their seats. Now, let us move to the subject at hand, the concerning signs that suggest Lord Voldemort may have returned. The chamber fell silent, the weight of those words hanging heavy in the air. Harry straightened in his seat, knowing that the real challenge to make a change was about to begin. Chapter 286, Politics and Power. The silence that fell over the Wisen gamat chamber after Dumbledore's declaration was deafening. Harry could feel the tension rising as the chief warlock continued to speak, his voice carrying the weight of grave tidings. Now, to the matter at hand, Dumbledore proceeded. We are gathered to discuss the events surrounding the third task of the Triwizard Tournament and the alarming implications thereof. He paused, his piercing blue eyes sweeping across the chamber. It is with grave concern that I inform you of the possible return of he who must not be named. Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the chamber like wildfire, the sound of rustling robes and shocked murmurs filling the air. Dumbledore raised a hand, and silence fell once more, his authority unquestioned in this moment. Charles Potter has recounted a harrowing experience wherein he was transported to a graveyard via a portkey disguised as the Triwizard Cup. There, he encountered Death Eaters and witnessed a dark ritual, culminating in the resurrection of the Dark Lord. Lord Ogden, a stern-looking man with a neatly trimmed beard, rose from his seat, his voice cutting through the tension. What evidence supports this claim, beyond the word of the boy? What have the Aurors found in their investigations, Madam Bones? Amelia stood, her monocle glinting in the enchanted light. The location where Charles Potter was brought was completely burnt up. Only little traces remain. We could confirm that Charles was brought there via a portkey. And we could also confirm that a dark ritual was performed there. Unfortunately, we could not identify the ritual. The Department of Mysteries is working on it. She paused, her voice growing stronger as she continued. Another piece of evidence to support this story is that Charles had been under prolonged cruciatus exposure and showed signs of his blood being taken to perform the ritual. Supporting this is Barty Crouch Jr.'s confession in front of many witnesses that his master would be back. Given that we know Lord Voldemort is the master of Barty Crouch Jr., it lends credibility to Charles's story. The room buzzed with whispers and murmurs, the implications of these revelations hanging heavy in the air. Then, Cornelius Fudge rose from his seat, his lime-green bowler hat clutched in his hands, his expression stern and unyielding. Lords and ladies, Fudge began, his voice projecting authority, I must address these claims with utmost seriousness. While Charles Potter's account is indeed troubling, we cannot credibly believe in the words of one child. Harry felt his jaw tighten. As Lord Potter, he could not remain silent here. He had to support Charles. Minister Fudge, are you suggesting that Charles was lying about his experiences? That he has not suffered under the cruciatus? Fudge shook his head firmly, his jowls quivering with emotion. No, Lord Potter, I am just saying we cannot accept something as big as the return of you-know-who on the words of an immature child. He might have been fooled, or it is possible he was under the influence of a dark spell or hallucinations that caused him to remember the events of his kidnapping wrongly. Yes, I understand we need more evidence to confirm the truth of the events, Harry responded, his voice cool and measured, but isn't it your own fault we are in this position, Minister? What do you mean, Lord Potter? Fudge's face began to redden. I had with some difficulty captured Barty Crouch Jr. and provided you with the culprit of all the events surrounding Charles's entry into the Triwizard Tournament and his kidnapping. But you, esteemed minister, had to go to his holding room for no reason, and that too with a Dementor, leading us to lose our chance of knowing the truth. Fudge bristled, his face flushing deeper. The Dementor was my guard and it acted to ensure my safety. Crouch was a dangerous criminal. Measures were taken to prevent any harm. Yes, Harry countered, you needed a Dementor to guard you in a school where some of the strongest wizards in Britain were present to ensure everyone's safety. What if the Dementor had gone rogue and attacked the students in the school? It would have created quite an international incident. An older witch with silver hair, Lady Marchbanks, rose from her seat, her authoritative presence drawing all eyes. Enough. This bickering serves no purpose. The question is whether we accept the possibility of you-know-who's return and how we proceed. Harry inclined his head respectfully. I am sorry, Lady Marchbanks. I spoke out of order, but you know we are talking about the return of a Dark Lord to defeat whom my grandparents sacrificed their lives. I understand, Lord Potter. But we must move forward, Lady Marchbanks replied, her tone softening slightly. Dumbledore nodded appreciatively. Well said, Lady Marchbanks. Minister Fudge, do you have any alternative explanation? Fudge cleared his throat, adjusting his robes nervously. It's plausible that remnants of you-know-who's followers attempted a resurrection ritual, perhaps led by Peter Pettigrew, who, as we know, escaped from Azkaban. The ritual likely failed, causing an explosion. Young Charles, caught in the chaos, may have imagined the Dark Lord's return. A few heads nodded, considering this possibility. Harry watched them carefully, noting how desperately they clung to any explanation that didn't involve Voldemort's return. The fear the Dark Lord had instilled ran deep, even after all these years. Dumbledore surveyed the assembly, his blue eyes grave. Are there any further comments before we proceed to a vote? Lord Potter. Harry rose slowly, his voice steady and clear. While the minister's explanation might seem plausible, there are too many uncertainties and inconsistencies to completely dismiss the possibility of you-know-who's return. Given the stakes, it would be prudent to continue our investigations thoroughly. Ignoring potential threats will not make them disappear, and if, as Charles said, you-know-who is back or this was the work of any other dark forces, we should not give them any chance to grow. A few murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. We stand to lose nothing by allowing the Aurors to proceed with their investigations, Harry continued, his words carrying weight despite his youth. However, we risk everything if we choose to ignore these warnings. I am sure no one wants to experience the dark days of the Wizarding War. Now many heads nodded in support, the memory of those dark times still fresh in their minds. Dumbledore inclined his head. Thank you, Lord Potter, for your insight. Let us proceed to a vote. His voice rang clear through the chamber. Firstly, all those who believe that he who must not be named has returned, please signify. A scattering of hands rose, including those of Sirius, Amelia, and a few others. The majority, however, remained still, unwilling or unable to face that possibility. Dumbledore's eyes reflected a hint of disappointment. Noted. Secondly, all those in favor of continuing and intensifying the investigation into these events, please signify. This time, a significant majority raised their hands. Even those who had not believed in Voldemort's return saw the wisdom in being cautious. Motion carried, Dumbledore declared. Madam Bones, you are authorized to allocate additional resources to this investigation. Amelia stood, her posture straight and determined. Thank you, Chief Warlock. We will proceed accordingly. Fudge's face tightened into a mask of barely concealed frustration, but he remained silent as Dumbledore moved to the next order of business. Chapter 287, More Politics. Now to our second matter of concern, Dumbledore announced, his voice grave. We must address the tragic loss of several prominent members of our community on the night of the third task. The chamber, which had barely recovered from the previous discussion, grew tense once more. A lord from the dark faction of the Wisen gamat rose to speak. Madam Bones, he called out, his voice carrying across the chamber. What have your Aurors discovered about these deaths? These were prominent members of our society, surely there must be some explanation. Amelia stood, her expression grim. Our investigation has been challenging. We have been unable to locate any bodies, nor can we confirm exactly where or how they died. The only concrete evidence we have of their deaths is the activation of their wills. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Had it not been for the will activations, we would have assumed they had simply disappeared. It's worth noting that these individuals were among those who claimed to have acted under the Imperious Curse during you-know-who's first rise. If they believed he had returned from Charles's words after he escaped, fleeing would have been a logical response. Fudge shot to his feet, his face reddening. Since you-know-who is not back, they had no reason to flee. These were good people, upstanding members of our community. There must be another explanation for their deaths. Lord Ogden leaned forward in his seat. Madam Bones, do you have any leads at all? Well, Amelia replied carefully, our only lead comes from Charles Potter's account of his kidnapping. According to his testimony, after the supposed resurrection of you-know-who, these individuals appeared at the graveyard, prostrating themselves before him and reaffirming their allegiance. They reportedly boasted of their continued devotion, claiming they had been strategically positioned within the ministry, awaiting his return. Impossible! Fudge exploded, his bowler hat quivering in his hands. Lord Ogden raised his hand. Madam Bones, please continue. If so many Death Eaters were present, how did young Potter manage to escape? According to Charles's account, he was rescued by an unknown wizard who appeared suddenly in the graveyard and facilitated his escape. So Mr. Potter did not witness what transpired afterward. Ogden pressed. Amelia shook her head. No, but the magical residue at the scene indicates an intense battle took place. We can reasonably conclude there was a confrontation between this unknown wizard and the assembled Death Eaters and their leader. Fudge suddenly straightened, his eyes bright with perceived opportunity. Issue a warrant for this wizard's arrest immediately. We must interrogate Charles Potter and obtain a description of this unknown killer. Harry couldn't help but interject, his voice cutting through the chamber with precise control. So, esteemed minister, you now agree that my younger brother is telling the truth and you know who is back? Fudge spluttered, his face purpling. Why are we here again? We already reached the decision that you know who is dead and not back. It is just the ramblings of a child. Ah, Harry replied, his tone deceptively light, but here you are believing the words of the same child and believing that an unknown wizard saved Charles and then killed your friends in the ministry. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Harry's words sank in. Fudge opened and closed his mouth several times, but no words emerged. Lord Longbottom rose, his face stern. Minister, Lord Potter raises a valid point. You cannot selectively believe parts of Charles's testimony while dismissing others. Fudge's complexion had turned an interesting shade of puce. This is different. The deaths are confirmed facts. We must find the perpetrator. Yet you refuse to acknowledge what preceded these deaths, Harry pressed, his voice calm but unyielding. The very context that might explain them. Lady Marchbanks cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on establishing the facts. Madam Bones, what actions does your department recommend? Amelia took a deep breath. The only lead we have is Charles. If we cannot believe in his testimony, even if this unknown wizard is caught using the face we get from Charles, we have no way of proving his involvement in the deaths of the ministry members. He could also argue that Charles was hallucinating. Additionally, it might not be easy to capture the wizard. We've found traces of extremely powerful magic, their magic beyond what most wizards are capable of performing. Lord Ogden leaned forward. Are you suggesting this unknown wizard was exceptionally powerful? The magical signatures we found. Amelia paused, choosing her words carefully, they indicate someone of extraordinary ability. Maybe stronger than our chief warlock. My department is not equipped to deal with wizards of such strength. Whispers erupted throughout the chamber. Harry kept his face carefully neutral, though he was enjoying seeing the scared faces of the wizards in the room, especially those from the dark side. This is precisely why we must apprehend this individual. Fudge declared. Someone capable of such destruction cannot be allowed to roam free. Minister, we are here again, Harry countered coolly. Even if with difficulty we capture this very strong wizard, we have no way of proving his involvement since you refuse to believe in Charles. Also, even if he is caught, I as the Lord Potter would do my best to ensure he got away free. If not for him, my younger brother would not have escaped the graveyard that night. The chamber fell silent once more. Fudge shifted uncomfortably in his seat, seemingly unable to find an appropriate response. Lord Elphias Doge, a known supporter of Dumbledore's faction, rose from his seat. While I do not entirely agree with Minister Fudge's interpretation of these events, I must acknowledge that the unknown wizard involved poses a significant threat. It is unacceptable for someone to kill others without just cause. Instead of resorting to murder, this individual should have been captured and brought before the Wisen gamat for a fair trial. Harry's mind flashed to Arcturus's teachings. Elphias's support for Fudge was unexpected, but not surprising. Dumbledore's faction often favored strict control over powerful individuals. As Lord Potter, Harry declared, his voice firm, I cannot support punishing someone who saved a member of my family. Also, based on Charles's recount, the odds were against the mysterious savior, and in that situation, when fighting for his life against such a strong group, he likely had no choice but to defend himself lethally. Therefore, his actions were in self-defense and not a crime. The Aurors should not waste their time with this wizard. You know whose return is more important. I do not agree in having an arrest warrant against him. Harry's eyes swept the chamber. Also, I repeat, if you agree about this mysterious wizard and use Charles to get his description, then you agree on his other accounts. So if you want to have an arrest warrant on this wizard, you must also agree to the return of you-know-who. Else the Daily Prophet would have a field day talking about this. Sirius stood in support of his godson. Lord Potter is right. We should not go after this wizard now. Since, as you all say, we cannot believe in Charles's story, let's wait for this person to act again. If again he kills people, we can put a warrant out for him. No one countered Sirius and Harry again. Fudge's face tightened into a mask of barely concealed frustration, but he remained silent as Dumbledore moved to address the matter. I believe we need to vote on the course of action regarding this matter, Dumbledore announced. First, those in favor of issuing an arrest warrant for the unknown wizard. The vote failed, with Harry's and Sirius's vocal opposition swaying many members. However, when Dumbledore called for a vote on continuing the investigation into the incident itself, a clear majority raised their hands in support. Harry did not care much. He was quite confident nothing could be found, and as he said earlier, even if anyone found out he was the unknown wizard, they had no evidence to prove it. The fire had ensured nothing was left in the graveyard. And if they tried force, his wand and sword were ready to teach them a lesson. Motion carried, Dumbledore declared. Madam Bones, you have the Wisen gamat's full support in this investigation. Thank you, Chief Warlock, Amelia responded, her expression determined. We will pursue every lead, regardless of where it takes us. As the session drew to a close, Dumbledore thanked everyone for their participation and commitment to safeguarding the wizarding world. As the assembly began to disperse, Harry felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Sirius smiling proudly. Well done, Harry. You handled yourself admirably. Thanks, Sirius, Harry replied, relief washing over him. Lord Diggory approached them. Wise words, young man. It's refreshing to see such level-headedness. Thank you, Lord Diggory, Harry said modestly. Amelia joined them, her expression thoughtful. You've made an impression today, Harry. Keep it up. He smiled appreciatively. I will. As they exited the ministry, the afternoon sun bathed them in warmth. Harry took a deep breath, feeling a sense of accomplishment mixed with the sobering reality of the challenges ahead. Come on, Sirius said, clapping him on the back. Let's head home. There's much to discuss. They operated back to Bones Manor, where the house elves had prepared a hearty meal. Over dinner, they reflected on the day's events. Fudge won't make things easy, Amelia cautioned. He's more concerned with public image than the truth. We'll have to be vigilant, Sirius agreed. But at least we secured continued investigation. Harry nodded. It's a start. And perhaps, in time, others will come to see the truth. Harry was quite satisfied with the day. He had changed many things from the canon. With the investigation and the fact that Voldemort did not have many influential people in the ministry now, he would have difficulty creating too many problems. His actions would be very limited. Now he had to wait until he learns of Voldemort's movements to continue to act. Harry was sure he would learn things soon. The Order would start again, and there was one thing they were good at, getting information about Voldemort. Chapter 288, Mastering the Dark Arts. After the intense Wisen gamat meeting, Harry had no time to rest. Arcturus was determined that Harry wouldn't waste any precious moments. Following a few brief praises of Harry's performance, he began tutoring him in dark magic. Voldemort's return leaves us little time, Arcturus explained grimly. You need to use every available moment to learn and become stronger. Early the next morning, Harry found himself descending into the Black Castle's underground ritual chamber, a vast space dimly lit by floating orbs of blue fire. Ancient stone walls surrounded them, their surfaces carved with protective runes that seemed to pulse with contained power. Dark magic, Arcturus began, his voice echoing slightly in the expansive chamber, is not inherently evil, merely dangerous. It's like handling raw lightning, immensely powerful, but it can destroy the wielder if proper precautions aren't taken. With practiced ease, Arcturus activated the protective wards around the ritual circle. Harry recognized some of the symbols from Voldemort's memories: ancient Egyptian protections against magical backlash, Norse runes for mental shielding, and Greek bindings to contain wild magic. We'll begin with blood magic, Arcturus continued. It's one of the more stable branches of dark magic, though still treacherous if mishandled. He withdrew a small silver knife, its blade edged with flowing scripts. 3 drops of blood, no more. The number is crucial. Magic loves symbolism, and 3 represents catalyst and change. Harry accepted the knife, making a small cut on his palm. 3 drops of blood fell onto a specific point in the ritual circle, causing the silver lines to flash crimson momentarily. He watched intently as Arcturus began the incantation. Blood carries intent, Arcturus explained. It remembers what you've done, what you've suffered, what you've overcome. Dark magic feeds on these memories and emotions. But you must control them, not let them control you. That entire first day was spent mastering a blood-based shield charm. Unlike the standard Protego, this shield drew power from the caster's very life force, making it nearly unbreakable but at a terrible cost if maintained too long. Harry struggled to balance the immense power with the draining effect it had on him, but under Arcturus's guidance, he began to grasp the fundamentals. The following day introduced a new lesson. Today, we'll explore emotion-based magic, Arcturus announced after Harry had made progress with the shield. These spells require intense feelings, but not the crude anger that powers common dark curses. We're talking about deeper emotions: grief, betrayal, despair. Harry nodded, recalling the fragmented knowledge gleaned from Voldemort's memories. Under Arcturus's methodical instruction, those scattered pieces were finally beginning to make sense. The Midnight Spear, Arcturus demonstrated, his wand moving in a complex pattern. A javelin of pure darkness materialized, crackling with purple energy. It draws power from loss and regret. The deeper the emotion, the stronger the spell. Harry's first attempt produced only wisps of shadow. He couldn't generate enough intense emotion to get the spell right. Even thinking about his time with the Dursleys wasn't enough. Determined, he improvised, imagining scenarios in his mind that evoked stronger emotions. After a few more tries, he successfully created a solid spear that shattered their practice dummy. Good, Arcturus nodded. But be careful. These emotions can poison your mind if you dwell on them too long. That's why a proper meditation session afterward is essential. By the end of the day, Harry felt both exhausted and exhilarated. He had made significant progress, but the weight of the emotions he had tapped into lingered, reminding him of the fine line he walked. The next morning brought another branch of dark magic. Today, we'll delve into soul magic, Arcturus announced. Not the crude Horcruxes Voldemort favored, but subtler arts spells to sense life force, detect if anyone is nearby, understand the connections between souls, and protect one's own soul from external influence. Soul magic is perhaps the most dangerous, Arcturus warned. Not because of its immediate effects, but because mistakes here can damage you in ways that never heal. They practiced several spells, and Harry found himself excelling in this area. His strong will, bolstered by his rebirth and the fragments of Voldemort's Horcruxes he had absorbed, allowed him to grasp soul magic more easily than other types of dark magic. This was the only day he genuinely enjoyed his lessons, feeling a sense of accomplishment as he mastered each spell. The following day focused on curse magic. Now we'll study curse magic, not the simple hexes taught at school, but true curses that affect the very essence of their targets, Arcturus explained, gesturing to a new dummy that Myra had brought in. The Withering Curse. Unlike the Killing Curse, which simply severs the soul from the body, this curse breaks down both flesh and spirit simultaneously. It's extremely painful, though slower than Avada Kedavra. A difficult spell that not many wizards can cast. Be sure to dodge this spell, it cannot be defended against by a shield charm. Harry recognized this from Voldemort's memories. The Dark Lord had used it rarely, preferring the dramatic flash of the Killing Curse. The wand movement was complex, a triple spiral followed by a sharp downward slash. His first attempt produced only a faint grey mist that made the dummy's surface fade slightly. You're hesitating, Arcturus observed. Dark magic requires conviction. You must mean it, must want to cause that destruction. Not out of hatred necessarily, but out of absolute certainty in your action. Harry tried again, this time imagining using the spell to protect those he cared about. The curse struck true, the dummy crumbling to ash in seconds. Better, Arcturus approved. Now for something more subtle, the Mind Maelstrom Curse. It traps the victim in their worst memories, similar to a Dementor's effect but more targeted. This spell proved particularly challenging. It required the caster to draw upon their own dark memories while maintaining enough mental distance to avoid being caught in the effect themselves. This is why proper occlumency is essential for dark magic, Arcturus explained as Harry struggled. You must be able to access these emotions while keeping your core self separate from them. After a draining series of practice sessions, Arcturus called for a break. Myra appeared with revitalizing potions and light refreshments. Remember, Arcturus said as they rested, dark magic leaves traces on the caster. That's why we perform the cleansing rituals daily. Miss even one day, and the residue begins to accumulate, affecting your thoughts, your magic, even your physical health. Harry nodded, already feeling the effects, a heaviness in his chest, a slight darkening of his thoughts despite the precautions. How do you avoid becoming addicted to it? I've seen in my research that many dark wizards seem unable to stop. The key is balance, Arcturus explained. Light magic, dark magic, they're tools, nothing more. The moment you start favoring one exclusively, you lose perspective. That's why we'll also study advanced light magic, not the simplified versions taught at Hogwarts, but the ancient arts of healing, protection, and purification. The following days were spent studying the purest forms of light magic, creating the necessary balance to offset their darker work. Harry found this combination challenging but essential, understanding that true mastery lay not in power alone but in maintaining equilibrium. As the training progressed, he learned spells requiring sacrifice, rituals touching upon soul magic, and curses feeding on negative emotions. None except soul magic came easily to him. The dark arts felt wrong, twisted. But he persevered, knowing the importance of understanding both the spells and their counters. Each evening after training, Harry spent an hour in meditation, cleansing his mind of the day's darkness. The fragments of Voldemort's knowledge helped him grasp the concepts quickly, though the practical application remained challenging. Arcturus ensured that Harry was introduced to every kind of dark magic before delving deeper into any particular branch. They moved on to soul magic one day, curses the next, and emotion-based spells after that. Each session was exhausting but necessary, equipping Harry with the knowledge and skills he needed to confront the looming threat of Voldemort and any other dark wizards in the future. Despite the grueling training, Harry found moments of enjoyment, especially when he excelled in areas where his innate abilities shone through. His strong will and the residual influence of Voldemort's dark magic allowed him to master certain spells with ease, even if he personally found them unsettling. By the end of the 10 days, Harry had developed a rudimentary but solid foundation in various dark magics. He understood the importance of control, the necessity of balance, and the dangers that came with wielding such powerful forces. However, through the training, he realized how fortunate he had been during his battle with Voldemort at the Resurrection. Thankfully, he hadn't given Voldemort any opportunity to use spells, otherwise, if any of these had hit him, he might have died. Now, he felt more prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He was ready to confront any Dark Lord. Although he might not use much dark magic and would focus more on his lightning magic, some of the dark spells gave him ideas. He was excited to experiment with them to make himself even more unbeatable. Chapter 289, Dark Reflections and Brighter Days. After 2 weeks of intensive dark arts training, Sirius's arrival in the ritual chamber was almost a welcome interruption. Harry had just finished his evening cleansing meditation when his godfather appeared, eyeing the scattered remnants of practice dummies that were still smoking with evident unease. "Cheerful place you've got here," Sirius commented, trying to mask his discomfort with humor. Despite reconciling with his family heritage, dark magic still set him on edge, too many memories of relatives who'd lost themselves to its seductive power. "We're done for the day," Arcturus assured him, inspecting Harry's magical aura for residual darkness. "Your godson shows remarkable restraint, though he lacks our family's natural affinity for the darker arts." "Thank Merlin for small favors," Sirius muttered under his breath before raising his voice. "How are you holding up, pup?" "I'm fine," Harry replied, climbing out of the purification circle. "The cleansing rituals help. Though I can see why dark wizards go mad if they skip them. The corruption is subtle at first," Arcturus agreed. "A slight edge to your thoughts, a bit more anger than usual, a tendency to see the worst in others. By the time most practitioners notice the changes, they're already too far gone." Sirius shifted uncomfortably. "I remember Bella's episodes. Especially after using certain family spells." "Indeed. Your cousin never possessed the discipline required for proper cleansing," Arcturus said, his tone carrying a hint of ancient regret. "She craved power but lacked the patience for essential safety measures." Harry gathered his notes, carefully storing them in a warded case. The theoretical knowledge was almost as dangerous as the practical applications. Dark magic theory had a way of worming into one's thoughts if studied too long without precautions. "It's fascinating magic," Harry admitted. "Dangerous, yes, but I can see why wizards are drawn to it. The raw power, the efficiency, though I still prefer standard spells for most situations." "A wise perspective," Arcturus nodded approvingly. "Dark magic should remain a last resort, not a default choice. Such power invariably demands its price." "Speaking of prices," Sirius interjected, "I came to see how you're both doing, but also to discuss something else. Dumbledore's reached out about restarting the Order." Arcturus replied, "You two decide this on your own. I am too old for war plans and things. Speaking of plans, you need a break, Harry. Dark magic requires more than just daily cleansing. You need periods of complete separation from it, or the residue will build up regardless of precautions. Harry began to protest, but Arcturus raised a hand. A few days, at least. Go somewhere. Clear your mind. The training will be here when you return. He's right, Sirius added, concern evident in his voice. You've been at this non-stop. Take some time. Harry considered his options. He had been meaning to visit France, or more specifically, a certain part Villa champion who'd been sending him regular letters. I suppose a few days in France wouldn't hurt. Excellent choice, Sirius grinned, his knowing look making Harry flush slightly. They relocated to the considerably more welcoming drawing room, where the conversation turned to order business. You mentioned something about the order. Harry prompted, settling into one of the plush armchairs. Yes, you know the Order of the Phoenix. Dumbledore's group formed during the last war, Sirius replied. I know. So what do they want from you? Harry inquired. Well, he wants a secure location for meetings and asked if he could use Grimmauld Place. Harry's eyebrows shot up. The same Grimmauld Place you've spent months renovating? You know the Order might change things in ways you don't like. He paused, studying his godfather's expression. Are you planning to rejoin them? Sirius shook his head emphatically. No chance. My Auror duties keep me busy enough. Truth be told, I wasn't keen on offering up the house either. It was Amelia's suggestion. A sly grin spread across his face. She pointed out that since it's my property, we could monitor the Order's activities and stay informed about what they know regarding Voldemort's movements. Clever, Harry mused, though his brow furrowed in thought. But surely Dumbledore will take precautions against information leaks. Sirius's grin widened. He thinks he can bring me back into his circle of trust. Besides, there's only so much he can do in someone else's house. This is a black property we're talking about, I maintain full control, and Creaker can come and go as he pleases. Even if they put it under the Fidelius charm, Creaker would still have access. It's your call, Harry shrugged. The Order does have a knack for gathering valuable intelligence, even if their use of it is sometimes questionable. Exactly, Sirius agreed, looking pleased with himself. We might as well take advantage of that. Just put restrictions in some places in the house, Harry advised. If the Order is going to be using that place, maybe the Weasley kids, Charles and their friends might also stay there for protection. I wouldn't want them to go into the library and create issues about the books on dark arts in there. Thanks for the reminder, Sirius grinned. I'll get Creaker on the job and maybe leave some surprises for the kids in the house. Can't be called a marauder without doing some pranks. Sirius's expression grew serious as he glanced at the dark arts tome on the side table. Just, be careful with all this, won't you? Dark magic has a way of seeping into your soul if you are not vigilant. I know, Harry assured him. I don't enjoy it, but understanding it might make the difference someday. Better to know how to defend against it than be caught off guard when a spell passes through my shield. Besides, I'm taking all the proper precautions. As long as you're sure, Sirius replied, his concern evident. By the way, drop by Bones Manor when you can. Susan and Aries have been asking after you. Some time with them would do you good. After Sirius left, Harry returned briefly to his studies before heading to Bones Manor for the evening. Spending a few hours with family helped clear his mind of the day's darker lessons. The next morning found Harry soaring over France in his Thunderbird form, having opted to avoid the tedious process of official international port keys. The crisp morning air rushed past him as he flew, each wing beat carrying him further from the oppressive atmosphere of his recent training. The freedom of flight seemed to wash away weeks of dark magic's residue, leaving his mind clearer than it had been in weeks. He landed near the Delacour estate, transforming back with practiced ease. Fleur must have sensed his arrival through the wards. She was already at the door when he approached, her smile radiant. Harry. I did not expect you until next week. Their greeting kiss was interrupted by Gabrielle's excited squeal. Harry. I missed you. The younger Delacour launched herself at him in a flying hug that would have knocked over someone without his training. Let him breathe, Gabrielle, Apollon Delacour called out, appearing in the doorway with her husband. Welcome, Harry. A pleasant surprise. Sebastian Delacour clasped Harry's hand warmly. Indeed. Though perhaps next time use the front gate? The wards do get nervous about intruders breaking in, even if they are our future son-in-law. Harry replied sheepishly, that would have ruined the surprise, wouldn't it? No, next time. After a leisurely lunch filled with comfortable family conversation, Fleur took Harry for a walk through their gardens. Away from younger sisters and knowing parents, they could properly greet each other. I've missed you, Harry murmured between kisses. It has been too long, Fleur agreed. Letters are not enough. She studied his face carefully. You look tired. This training your grandfather is you doing? Dark arts. Yes, it's tough, Harry admitted. Necessary, but draining. Arcturus insisted I take a break. Good, Fleur said firmly. You need rest. And perhaps. Her eyes sparkled mischievously, some time away? The black beach house you mentioned before. Harry grinned. I was thinking the same thing. Your parents wouldn't mind. After our last night at Hogwarts. Fleur laughed softly. They know we are both adults, Harry. They trust us. That evening, over dinner, they announced their plans to spend a few days at the beach house. The knowing looks exchanged by Fleur's parents made Harry blush slightly, though their approval was clear. Just try to leave before Gabrielle wakes up, Sebastian advised with a wink. Otherwise, you'll never escape without her. The next morning, they slipped out just before dawn, leaving a note for a surely disappointed Gabrielle. The Black Beach house welcomed them with warm breezes and absolute privacy, wards ensuring they had their own piece of Mediterranean paradise. Finally, Fleur sighed contentedly, curling into Harry's arms as they watched the sunrise from their private balcony. Just us. Harry pulled her closer, feeling the last traces of dark magic's influence fade in the warmth of her presence. They had 3 days of peace ahead of them, and they intended to make every moment count. The 3 days passed in a perfect blend of sunlit beaches, quiet moments, and shared laughter. Away from the pressures of war preparations and dark magic training, Harry and Fleur could simply be themselves, two people in love, stealing precious moments of peace before the storms ahead. Gabrielle's daily owls, alternating between guilt trips and demands for souvenirs, provided amusing interludes to their private paradise. They made sure to pick up several gifts for her, knowing it would somewhat make up for their escape. Their return to the Delacour estate brought an enthusiastic welcome from Gabrielle, who forgave them instantly upon receiving a shell that sang mermaid songs when held to your ear. After a final family dinner and promises to visit again soon, it was time for Harry to return to his training. Back at Black Castle, Harry felt refreshed, ready to continue his education in the darker arts. The break had done its work, his mind was clearer, his magic more controlled. Arcturus nodded approvingly when Harry returned to the ritual chamber. Better. The darkness has less hold now. Shall we continue? Harry raised his wand, ready to delve back into the shadows, but now with a brighter light to guide him home. Chapter 290, The Order Reconvenes. A few days after Harry's return from France, as he was practicing some particularly intricate wand movements in the Black Castle's training room, Sirius appeared with news. First Order meeting tonight, he announced, leaning against the doorframe. Care to join me? Might be interesting to see who shows up. Harry lowered his wand, considering the invitation. Could be enlightening, he agreed. When do we leave? An hour before dusk, Sirius replied. Plenty of time for you to wrap up and get ready. As evening approached, they approached to a quiet, nondescript square in London, standing before what appeared to be an empty gap between numbers 11 and 13. Harry frowned, experiencing a peculiar sensation as his memories of the place became fuzzy and indistinct. The building itself seemed to have vanished entirely. Fidelius's charm, Harry noted, impressed despite himself. Dumbledore works fast. Sirius's eyes twinkled with mischief as he handed Harry a slip of parchment. Read this and memorize it. The note, written in Dumbledore's distinctive, flowing script, read, the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix may be found at number 12, Grimmauld Place, London. As Harry committed the words to memory, the house materialized before them, squeezing itself between its neighbors like an unfolding secret. Number 12 Grimmauld Place stood tall and foreboding, its dark facade looming over the quiet street. They climbed the worn stone steps, and true to form, Sirius managed to trip over the troll-leg umbrella stand in the entrance hall. The resulting crash echoed through the house, triggering an ear-splitting shriek that made Harry smile for some weird reason. Blood traitors! Shame of my flesh! How dare you befoul the house of my fathers! A piercing voice screamed from behind heavy velvet curtains. Harry turned to Sirius with raised eyebrows. Wasn't your mother's portrait moved to the Black Vault years ago? Sirius pressed a finger to his lips, his eyes dancing with suppressed laughter. Harry caught on immediately this was one of his godfather's pranks, likely designed to welcome the Order members to their new headquarters. The interior of Grimmauld Place bore little resemblance to the gloomy dwelling Harry remembered from the books or his first visit here years ago. Years of renovation had transformed it into an elegant, if slightly dark, townhouse. The serpentine fixtures remained, but they'd been polished to a gleam, and the overall atmosphere was more sophisticated than sinister. "Watcher, Harry!" A bright voice called out. He turned to see Nymphadora Tonks, her hair a vibrant shade of purple, weaving her way through the hallway. "Hello, Nymphadora," Harry replied with deliberate cheerfulness. "How's life?" Tonks's hair flashed red. "Don't call me that." "But I thought I had permission from our tutoring days," Harry said innocently. "You know when I helped you through your newt year. That was a one-time deal, and you know it." Tonks huffed, though a smile played at the corners of her mouth. Sirius looked between them, feigning confusion. "When was this, and why don't I remember it?" "It wasn't a secret." "I think you just forgot," Harry replied. "Didn't you notice her clumsiness improved drastically in a year? I was responsible for that." "Now that you mention it," Sirius mused, "it has been a while." "Sorry, the training keeps me busy," Tonks said sheepishly. "How is Auror training?" Harry asked, genuinely interested. "Brutal," she laughed. "But Moody says I'm getting there. Though he still yells constant vigilance, at least twice a day." As they moved further into the house, the scene became chaotic. Several Order members were frantically wrestling with heavy velvet curtains, attempting to silence the shrieking portrait. Kreaker hovered nearby, appearing to help but somehow managing to undo their progress at every turn. It seemed Sirius had enlisted his assistance to add to the mayhem. "Shame of my flesh!" Walburga Black's portrait screamed upon seeing Sirius. Then, spotting Harry, her tone shifted dramatically. "Ah, young Lord Potter! At least one person in this house has proper breeding. Though you could do better than associating with my disappointment of a son." "Mother, always a pleasure," Sirius called out cheerfully, making no move to close the curtains. "I see you're giving our guests a proper Black family welcome." "Guests?" the portrait screeched. "Invaders. Desecrating our noble home with their filthy presence." Molly Weasley, red-faced from exertion, attempted another charm on the curtains. "Sirius, dear," she said through gritted teeth, "couldn't you do something about this?" "Oh, I couldn't possibly remove my dear mother's portrait," Sirius replied, the picture of innocence. "It would be disrespectful to the Black family heritage." "Right, Kreaker. Master Sirius is showing proper respect for once," Kreaker agreed solemnly, while accidentally yanking the curtains open for the 5th time. "Blood traitors! Shame of my flesh! How dare you befoul the house of my fathers!" Walburga bellowed again. Having had enough fun, Harry stepped forward with an amused smile. "Madam Black, you're looking as lovely as ever. I must say the new frame suits you." The portrait's demeanor shifted instantly. "Young Lord Potter! So kind of you to notice. At least someone here appreciates proper aesthetics." "Oh, come on," Sirius protested. "I'm the one who picked that frame." "Quiet, ungrateful child," Walburga snapped before turning back to Harry. "Tell me, dear boy, how is Lord Black? That man, at least, understands the importance of tradition." "Always the exemplar of pure-blood dignity," Harry replied smoothly. "Though he did mention you were supposed to be residing in the family vault these days." "Ah, but I heard guests were coming, and as a proper hostess, I asked Kreaker to bring me here so that I could be accommodating." Walburga's painted lips curved into an almost playful smile. "Though I must say, the company my son keeps." "Now, Mother," Sirius interrupted, still grinning, "play nice with our guests." Harry chuckled. "Madam Black, might I have your permission to close the curtains? I promise to visit properly another time when we can discuss how hopeless your son is at greater length." "I'm standing right here," Sirius complained, feigning indignation. "Very well," Walburga agreed graciously, ignoring her son entirely. "Do keep him in line, Lord Potter. Merlin knows someone must." As Harry drew the curtains closed with a respectful bow, he caught the astonished looks on the Order members' faces. Ron Weasley was muttering something that sounded like mental, completely mental, while Hermione Granger observed the interaction with keen interest. With the chaos subsiding, Harry took a moment to survey the assembled crowd. The kitchen was packed with familiar faces. The Weasleys were there in force, along with Remus Lupin, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and various other Order members he recognized. The Longbottoms stood chatting with Emmeline Vance, while the Potters conversed quietly with Elphias Doge. Twin cracks signaled the arrival of Fred and George Weasley, who appeared directly in front of Harry. "Enjoying your newfound freedom to apparate?" Harry asked dryly. "Absolutely," they chorused. "What about you, oh mighty champion?" Fred asked. "Must be nice having years of practice," George added. Harry's smile held a hint of steel. One of the perks of being abandoned and getting emancipated at 11. He didn't look at the Potters, but he could feel them stiffen across the room. The twins exchanged glances but quickly steered the conversation to lighter topics. Harry spent the next few minutes catching up with Neville Longbottom, who, despite growing braver over the years, still shuddered when he heard Harry discussing product ideas with the twins. The arrival of Dumbledore, with Severus Snape trailing like a particularly ill-tempered shadow, signaled the start of the meeting. Almost immediately, Molly Weasley began herding the younger crowd toward the door. "That includes you too," she told the twins firmly. "But we're of age." Fred protested. "Barely," Mrs. Weasley retorted. "Being 17 doesn't automatically make you ready for this." "I've faced Voldemort." Charles Potter interjected heatedly, causing several people to flinch at the name. "I think I've earned the right to know what's going on. I've helped research everything since first year," Hermione added. Turning to Sirius, she asked, "Speaking of which, would it be possible to access the Black Library?" "For purely academic purposes, of course." Sirius barked out a laugh. "Not a chance. The books in there are too dangerous for children. I wouldn't want any of you losing your hands while trying to read a book, and I mean that literally. Some of those tomes bite, and others do far worse." As the teenagers were being escorted out, they spotted Harry standing calmly in the kitchen. "But Harry gets to stay," they protested in unison. Before Molly could respond, Harry spoke smoothly. "Mrs. Weasley, with all due respect, you don't have authority over my movements. I'm here at Sirius's invitation. If my presence is unwelcome, I'm happy to leave. I have other matters requiring my attention." "That won't be necessary, Mr. Potter," Dumbledore interjected, his blue eyes twinkling behind his half-moon spectacles. "You're quite welcome to stay. However, the others must have the permission of their parents." The younger Weasleys, along with Charles, Hermione, and the other teenagers, filed out amid various degrees of grumbling and protest. As the door closed behind them, Harry took his seat between Sirius and Tonks, deliberately avoiding his parents' attempts to catch his eye. He noticed Sirius and Creaker exchange a subtle nod of satisfaction. Clearly, the evening's performance had gone exactly as planned. Dumbledore rose, and the low murmur of conversation died away. "Friends, old and new," he began solemnly, "welcome to the first meeting of the reconvened Order of the Phoenix." Chapter 291, The Order's Agenda and Confrontations Part -1. "Some of you already know why I've reconvened the Order," Dumbledore began, his voice echoing through the dimly lit kitchen of Grimmauld Place. The flickering candles cast long shadows, and the tension in the air was thick. "The Dark Lord, Voldemort, has returned." A shiver went through the gathered members. Some flinched at the mention of Voldemort's name, while others exchanged serious, knowing looks. For those who still doubt young Charles's account, Dumbledore continued, his gaze steady beneath his half-moon glasses, "Severus has confirmed Voldemort's resurrection through direct contact just a few nights ago. Voldemort is back and as dangerous as ever." A heavy silence fell over the room. The weight of the situation hung over everyone, making their mission seem even more daunting. "Unfortunately," Dumbledore went on, "we have major obstacles. The Ministry, especially Minister Fudge, refuses to believe this truth. He desperately hopes all of this will go away without damaging his political career and dismisses any evidence I show him." He turned his gaze to Sirius. "Have the Aurors made any progress on this front?" Sirius shook his head grimly. "None. Fudge won't move without what he calls concrete proof. We've given him evidence reports of known Death Eaters like Fenrir Greyback returning to the country, but he just finds excuses. He's convinced this is all some elaborate plot to undermine him." A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. He even suggested that you and Amelia are behind this to set yourselves up for the next ministerial election. Unless Voldemort shows himself publicly, which he's careful to avoid, Fudge won't change his mind. And with him refusing to act, we can't take any preventive measures or prepare for war. Indeed, Dumbledore sighed, his face looking weary. The situation at the Ministry gets more troubling by the day. Cornelius has surrounded himself with new advisors, people who have conveniently filled positions left empty by recent losses in our world. Harry caught the subtle reference to the dead Death Eaters. It proved that, as Harry thought, Dumbledore was upset by their deaths. The new advisors are different from the old guard, Sirius added. They don't have the experience or influence of their predecessors, but they're cunning. Every time Fudge dismisses a warning about Voldemort, they're right there, telling him exactly what he wants to hear. This leaves us largely alone in our fight, Dumbledore acknowledged, pacing slowly behind his chair. The Aurors are caught up in political games, and the Unspeakables won't act without official orders. They're busy with their own mysterious work and rarely get involved in conflicts like this. Our mission is clear: we must stop Voldemort's efforts, protect innocent people, and prevent the spread of darkness. He turned to Severus Snape, who stepped out of the shadows in the corner of the room. Severus, please share what you've learned of Voldemort's plans. Severus Snape stepped forward, his black robes billowing slightly as he moved into the light. His expression was hard to read, his dark eyes revealing nothing. The Dark Lord plans to rebuild his forces quietly, he said, his voice smooth but tense. He's especially interested in recruiting those the Ministry has pushed to the margins: werewolves, giants, and other magical beings who are angry at the current system. With his numbers down, he's eager to accept anyone willing to follow him. We have to stop this, Dumbledore said firmly. Turning to Remus Lupin, he continued, Remus, I need you to reach out to the werewolf communities. Get information and offer them alternatives. Of course, Remus replied quietly, a hint of resignation in his eyes. Hagrid and Madame Maxime have already started a similar mission to the giants, Dumbledore added. Harry noticed Snape's subtle reaction, a slight curl of his lip at the mention of werewolves. Old prejudices, born from past experiences, still lingered under his calm exterior. There's another serious matter, Dumbledore continued. Voldemort wants the complete prophecy from the Department of Mysteries. His current knowledge is incomplete, and he believes the full prophecy might reveal something important. Harry's interest peaked at the mention of the prophecy. He glanced at Snape and noticed a faint tightening around his eyes. Snape was a master of hiding his emotions, but Harry had spent years watching him. The mention of the prophecy clearly made him uneasy. Having observed both Snape and his mother throughout his school years, Harry had serious doubts about the eternal love motivation from his book memories. Maybe that was true in the book, but here there was no love between them. Snape's situation was more complicated, a risky balancing act between two powerful wizards. Forced into this by mistakes from his teenage years, Snape was now stuck working for both sides, each capable of killing him at any moment. Dumbledore went on, we must make sure Voldemort doesn't get it. I suggest setting up a guard rotation to watch the department and make sure the prophecy stays safe. Harry cleared his throat. Excuse me, Professor, but what exactly is this prophecy? I've heard about it so many times. Is it really that important? Harry knew the words from the book and didn't think the prophecy was all that important. The words were vague, and even if Voldemort knew what it said, nothing would really change. There would still be a battle. However, Harry wanted to see the prophecy for himself just to be sure if it was about him and Voldemort. His birthday wasn't in July, which made it seem less likely, but considering the other details, like the soul piece, he was sure he was the prophesied child. He might need to confirm it once and for all. Dumbledore regarded Harry with a steady gaze. The prophecy is very important, Mr. Potter. It concerns Charles and Voldemort. For everyone's safety, I think it's best to keep the details confidential. Okay, let's assume the prophecy is important, though I don't think it is, Harry interrupted. Why do we need to guard it? Only those named in it can retrieve it, like you said, only Charles and Voldemort. So unless you plan to guard it yourself, Headmaster, you're sending Order members to face a threat they can't handle. Harry's right, Sirius said immediately, his grey eyes flashing with conviction. If Voldemort can get past Ministry security and the department's defenses, what chance does a couple of Order members have? It would be suicide. Murmurs of agreement went around the table. Members who had fought in the First War nodded solemnly, their faces serious. Dumbledore's expression tightened slightly. He wasn't used to having his plans questioned like this. After a moment, though, he nodded. You make good points. I'll reconsider this plan and present an alternative at our next meeting. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The tension in the room eased a little, but it was short-lived as Dumbledore changed the topic. Now, about our efforts to identify the mysterious wizard who intervened at the graveyard. Harry's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Dumbledore's. Excuse me? What exactly are you trying to do? Wasn't my testimony to the Wisen gamat enough for you to understand? Dumbledore met his eyes steadily. We need to know who this person is, Mr. Potter. Anyone capable of using such destructive magic without oversight could be a potential threat. Harry's temper flared. A threat? This person saved Charles's life, facing Voldemort and his Death Eaters alone. And you want to hunt him down like a criminal instead of thanking him. Power that's strong, used without control or accountability, is dangerous, Dumbledore said. He took many lives that night. It was a significant loss to the wizarding world. A loss? Harry said incredulously. You're talking about some of the most ruthless Death Eaters, murderers who terrorized innocent people. Their deaths are a great loss? Is there something wrong with your mind, Professor? The individual had no right to take the law into his own hands, Dumbledore replied firmly. Those wizards, despite their past actions, could have been apprehended and given a chance at redemption. Redemption? Harry scoffed. That's the most naive thing I've heard. These are murderers who showed no remorse. People died to stop them, and you're talking about redemption? Their victims would be rolling in their graves. No one has the right to act as judge, jury, and executioner, Dumbledore insisted. He should have subdued them and let the Aurors handle justice. One wizard against Voldemort and his inner circle, and you expect him to take them alive? Harry shot back, his voice rising. That's not just unrealistic, it's absurd. Your defense of this individual is quite strong, Dumbledore observed, his eyes narrowing slightly. Is there something you'd like to share, Harry? Harry glared. He killed those Death Eaters to save Charles's life. I can't believe you're supporting this, Lily and James. Harry, Lily said gently, her eyes pleading. We understand how you feel, but Professor Dumbledore has a point. Power like that, used without limits, is concerning. Concerning? Harry repeated, his gaze hardening. That power saved your son's life. And now you're supporting a hunt for his savior. James stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. Harry, we're just thinking about everyone's safety. We need to know who this person is. Don't patronize me, Harry snapped. This isn't about safety. It's about control. Your leader can't stand the idea of someone powerful acting outside of his influence. Chapter 292, The Order's Agenda and Confrontations Part -2. Wait, Dumbledore said, raising a hand. Maybe we should all take a moment to... No, Harry cut him off. I've heard enough. This meeting was supposed to be about uniting against Voldemort, not chasing personal agendas against potential allies. Harry, please, Lily called after him, her voice trembling. He turned back, eyes blazing. What? Do you think I don't understand why Dumbledore wants to go after that wizard? I thought you, having grown up in the Muggle world with an open mind, would see what's happening here. Dumbledore, like most politicians and manipulators, can't stand people he can't control or who don't follow his ideas. Isn't that right, Headmaster? Your perspective is clouded, Dumbledore said softly. Your studies have taken you down a dark path. Harry's eyes flashed angrily. Oh, spare me the lecture. I've done my homework on you, Dumbledore. I know about your past, your early ideals with Grindelwald, your best buddy, and maybe more. Don't talk to me about right and wrong. Gasps echoed around the room. Dumbledore's expression remained serene, but a shadow passed over his eyes. I was young and made mistakes. I've dedicated my life to atoning for them. Have you? Harry challenged. Or have you just gotten better at hiding your true intentions? Manipulating events, and people, putting me with the Dursleys, arranging things at Hogwarts. It's all part of your big plan, isn't it? Harry, that's enough, James said firmly. No, let him speak, Dumbledore said calmly. If there are complaints, they should be heard. Fine, Harry said coldly. Didn't you notice anything off about Moody last year? A Death Eater was impersonating your old friend right under your nose. Either you're losing your touch, or you let it happen. Which one is it? A murmur spread through the room. Dumbledore's silence spoke volumes. You have issues with me, Harry, Dumbledore finally said. I understand that. Maybe it's because my decisions caused you to have a rough childhood, and I'm sorry for that. But that doesn't give you the right to make false accusations against me. Believe what you want, Harry replied, his voice steady and filled with determination. But understand this, I won't stand by while you try to hunt down someone who risked everything to save Charles. If you want to go after him, you'll have to get through me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. That's a debt the Potter family owes him. With that, Harry let his magical power flow freely. The room seemed to darken, the air buzzing with energy. Everyone could feel his strength, and a mix of awe and fear spread through the room. For the first time, Dumbledore truly felt Harry's power, and it was clear that Harry was nearly as strong as he was. You're strong, Dumbledore said quietly, his eyes locked on Harry's. There was no arrogance in his voice, it was just recognition of Harry's strength. Thanks to you, Professor, Harry responded, his gaze never wavering. Because of you, I learned early what power means and what it takes to protect myself and others. I've trained for years to be ready. So, what's the Order's decision? Will you focus on fighting Voldemort, or waste time and resources trying to control potential allies? Sirius rose to stand beside Harry. I'm with Harry on this. If the Order is more interested in controlling those who stand up against Voldemort than actually fighting him, then count me out. Sirius Dumbledore started, but he was cut off as Tonks also rose from her seat. He's right, she said firmly, her eyes blazing. This isn't what I signed up for. To everyone's surprise, Frank and Alice Longbottom stood up too. We came back to reconnect with old friends, Frank said calmly, though his voice carried a sharp edge. Not to join a campaign against those who might help us. We've learned the dangers of blind loyalty, and we're not going to make that mistake again. Alice nodded in agreement. Count me out too. If you think the Death Eaters who almost destroyed our family can be redeemed, then I don't want to be here. Harry looked to his parents, giving them one last chance. Well. Lily looked down at the table, her eyes conflicted. She couldn't bring herself to meet Harry's gaze, while James shifted uncomfortably beside her, trying to find the right words. I see, Harry said softly, his voice filled with finality. There's nothing more to discuss. I'm glad I never tried to fix our relationship. If you can turn against someone who saved your own child so easily, then our values clearly don't align. Even after everything our family has been through because of Dumbledore's manipulations, you still trust him. I don't want to be associated with that kind of thinking. Harry, you don't understand, James began, trying to explain. Charlie needs. There's no need to talk more, Harry interrupted, his expression hardening. I understand perfectly well. Dumbledore looked around the room, his expression unreadable, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. May we still use the house as headquarters? He asked, turning to Sirius. Sirius crossed his arms, his expression stern. Yes, but if you are going to put another Fidelius charm on it, I'll be involved, or it won't happen. This is my house. I will consider it and inform you of my decision, Dumbledore responded quietly. Without another word, Harry led the group out of the kitchen. As they walked away, the sound of renewed discussion followed them up the stairs, but Harry didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, weren't worth rebuilding. Outside, the cool night air was a relief. Harry took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. Well, Sirius said, trying to sound light-hearted as they walked down the empty street. That was eventful, to say the least. Yeah, Harry replied shortly, his mind still racing. How about a drink? Tonks suggested, offering a small smile. I think we all could use one after that. Agreed, Sirius said, nodding. Leaky cauldron. Sounds good, Harry said, and they made their way to the pub. Once they settled into a quiet corner of the pub, the tension between them started to ease. The Leaky Cauldron was busy, but their corner felt like a calm bubble in the middle of the noise. Sirius looked at Harry thoughtfully, his eyes studying his godson's face. You really let loose back there, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Harry sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. It's been building for a long time. Dumbledore needed to hear it. They all did. Was everything you said true? Tonks asked gently, her eyes curious. Harry nodded. I've done my research. There's more to Dumbledore than people think, more than he lets on. Sirius leaned back, looking thoughtful. I've heard rumors over the years, whispers of things that never quite made sense. If you've found something solid, I want to know. Another time, Harry promised, his voice heavy. It's a long story, and I'm not in the mood tonight. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Harry spoke again. Do you think they'll keep using the house? Probably, Sirius replied with a shrug. It's too useful to give up. But I expect Dumbledore will want to discuss the new terms with me. Tonks grinned, her eyes twinkling. And what about your dear Aunt Walburga? Are you going to let her stay? Sirius chuckled, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Oh, she stays. I can't deny the order the full Black family experience, can I? Let them deal with her screaming portrait. They all laughed, the tension easing further. It felt good to laugh, to let go of the weight of what had happened, even if just for a moment. Harry looked at both of them, his expression softening. Thank you, he said quietly. For standing with me tonight. It means a lot. Always, Sirius replied without hesitation, his loyalty clear. You're not alone in this, Tonks added sincerely. We're in it together, Harry. No matter what. Sirius raised his glass, determination in his eyes. To facing the future on our own terms. They clinked their glasses together, a silent pact formed among them. Chapter 293, A Dark Alliance Part 1. In the dimly lit chamber of a manor of one of his Death Eaters, Lord Voldemort sat upon his ornate throne-like chair, his pale fingers steepled beneath his chin. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by flickering candles that provided the only illumination. Before him stood a group of new Death Eaters' cousins, siblings, and lesser relatives of his fallen followers. These newcomers lacked the seasoned experience of his previous inner circle, but their eagerness to prove themselves made them valuable assets. Their eyes reflected a mix of fear and ambition as they looked up to their lord. Edwin Traverse, cousin to the late Death Eater of the same surname, stepped forward. His voice quavered slightly as he delivered his report. My lord, the minister continues to deny your return. Cornelius Fudge has grown increasingly hostile toward Dumbledore's warnings, dismissing them as fear-mongering. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained silent, allowing Traverse to continue. We've managed to position ourselves as close confidants to Fudge, added Reginald Yaxley, nephew of the deceased Death Eater. He believes we support his stance against Dumbledore. We're feeding him information that reinforces his disbelief in your return. A thin smile curved Voldemort's lips. Excellent. The more complacent he becomes, the less prepared the ministry will be when we are ready to strike. The reports continued, detailing small victories within the ministry's subtle policy manipulations, rumors undermining Dumbledore's credibility, and misinformation designed to sow confusion among the ranks. While none of these actions were monumental alone, together they wove a complex web of influence that slowly tightened around the wizarding government. Voldemort's gaze swept over the assembled group. Have all the families of our fallen comrades pledged their support? Duncan McNair, a burly man with a stern expression whom Harry would have recognized from the dueling tournament, stepped forward. Most of them, my lord. Many seek vengeance against the one who killed their kin. Good, Voldemort replied, his voice a cold whisper. And they will have their vengeance. Once Greyback finds any news about the wizard, I will capture him, and he will wish he had never crossed us. Voldemort's red eyes glinted with malice as he continued, Are there any families bold enough to show reluctance in following me? McNair hesitated before answering. The Malfoys, my lord. Lady Narcissa Malfoy is adamant about keeping her son away from our cause. Young Draco Malfoy shares her sentiments. He's fearful and unwilling to join us. Voldemort's expression darkened, his eyes flashing with irritation. They dare defy me. He tapped his long, pale fingers against the armrest of his chair. Narcissa believes she can escape retribution because of her maternal family's influence. She wagers that I won't move against the House of Black while my return remains hidden. He paused, contemplating. And she's correct for now. Without sufficient preparation, a direct confrontation with Arcturus Black, Sirius Black, or Hadrian Potter would be unwise. It could expose my plans prematurely. But Narcissa is foolish to think this situation will last indefinitely. When the time is right, she will learn the price of defiance. Shall I send someone to persuade them, my lord? McNair asked cautiously. Voldemort shook his head. No. The Malfoys have lost much of their wealth and influence since Lucius's downfall. They're of little consequence at the moment. Risking our strategy for petty vengeance is not worth it. As you wish, my lord, McNair replied, bowing slightly before stepping back into line. An eerie silence settled over the chamber. The new Death Eaters stood motionless, awaiting further instruction. Many of them had heard tales of Voldemort's wrath, yet tonight he seemed more calculating, less impulsive than the legends suggested. Many people including the fallen Death Eaters would have been surprised by this version of Voldemort. He seemed less crazed, more patient with his followers. For the new recruits, it was a relief. There was no yelling, no torture, no unnecessary cruelty. It felt like Voldemort was thinking clearly for the first time in years. A knock at the heavy wooden door interrupted the silence that had settled over the chamber. Voldemort's gaze snapped toward the sound. Enter, he commanded. The door creaked open, and a junior Death Eater hurried in, his eyes downcast. My lord, the delegation of dark wizards from Europe has arrived. Voldemort's interest piqued. Show them in. The young man bowed hastily and retreated. Moments later, an elderly wizard entered the chamber. He was tall and thin, with a mane of silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Despite his age, his posture was regal, and his eyes held a sharp intelligence. He was followed by two other, cloaked figures who remained a step behind him. The elderly wizard bowed deeply. Lord Voldemort, we thank you for granting us this audience. Voldemort's gaze was piercing. One of my followers mentioned that you are willing to support my cause. Indeed, the man replied. We believe our interests may align. Is that so? You claim to offer loyalty to my cause, Voldemort said, his tone measured. What is it you seek in return? The old wizard's eyes met Voldemort's without flinching. Our lord, he said plainly. We request your assistance in locating and freeing him from his imprisonment. In return, we offer our unwavering support. A faint sneer appeared on Voldemort's lips. You propose that I help you liberate your lord, and in exchange, you pledge loyalty to me? Forgive me if I question the sincerity of such an arrangement. The man remained composed. We understand your skepticism. However, our lord is a powerful wizard in his own right. If you can convince him to join forces, his allegiance and ours would greatly strengthen your position. And who is this powerful lord of yours? Voldemort inquired, curiosity flickering in his crimson eyes. The elderly wizard hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. The Dark Lord Grindelwald. A silence fell over the room, heavy and charged. The name hung in the air like a dark omen. Voldemort's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. Grindelwald, he repeated softly. Common knowledge holds that he was defeated and is dead. How do you know he is still alive? We have our ways, the man replied cryptically. We are his loyal followers, and we have means of knowing. He is alive but imprisoned somewhere. Voldemort leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly against the armrest. A cold smile spread across his lips. It seems the old fool Dumbledore hands out the same second chances at redemption to Dark Lords as he does to lesser wizards. How quaint! He chuckled softly before continuing. So, you wish me to free Grindelwald, and in return, you and your associates will aid me. Tell me, why should I risk freeing a rival Dark Lord? One who, by all accounts, sought his own dominion over the wizarding world. The old wizard's gaze was steady. Our lord's ambitions were misunderstood. He desired a world where magical folk could live openly, without fear of persecution, a vision not entirely dissimilar to your own. Voldemort's lips curled into a cold smile. Flattery will get you nowhere. Our goals may overlap, but our methods and endgames differ. Perhaps, the man conceded gracefully. But consider this, freeing him would throw the world into chaos, especially for those who believe he's gone for good. It would also discredit Dumbledore, who has publicly declared my lord's demise. The confusion would shift focus away from your plans, giving you the freedom to act without interference. Voldemort regarded him thoughtfully. The proposal had merit. I am not convinced. You offer me the support of aged wizards, long past their prime. What value does that hold for me? The old wizard's eyes glinted shrewdly. While we may not stand on the front lines and fight, we possess resources that are invaluable. We have extensive contacts within European ministries of magic, considerable wealth, and established connections with various magical communities including several major vampire covens. We can fund your endeavors, facilitate international recruitment, and open doors that have long been closed to British wizards. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We can also provide influence within the British Wisen gamat and aid in swaying decisions in your favor. With our support, we could remove Dumbledore from his positions of power and replace his influence with yours. Voldemort considered this carefully, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. The idea of expanding his influence beyond Britain's borders was undeniably appealing. With their resources, his plans could accelerate significantly. Undermining Dumbledore's authority was an added incentive. Your offer is intriguing, Voldemort admitted. But tell me, why not free Grindelwald yourselves? Surely you, as his devout followers, would be eager to rescue him. We have tried, the man confessed, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. But our actions are closely monitored by various ministries. Any overt move we make could alert authorities to our intentions and jeopardize everything. But you, Lord Voldemort, you possess the power and the knowledge to succeed where we have failed. Voldemort's eyes flashed with ambition. Perhaps. But how do I know you won't turn on me once your lord is free? The old wizard shook his head. We can begin aiding you immediately. We can work to undermine Dumbledore, help you gain supporters, and establish your influence before you assist us in freeing our master. Our loyalty will be demonstrated through our actions. Should our master be freed, we will continue to support you, provided he agrees to an alliance. Together, our combined strength would be unparalleled. A tense silence settled over the chamber as Voldemort weighed his options. The room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he spoke. I will consider your proposal. Return in 3 days, and we will discuss the specifics. Relief flickered across the man's face. Thank you, my lord. We look forward to your decision. As the delegation bowed and exited the chamber, the eyes of every Death Eater followed them until the heavy door closed behind them. Chapter 294, A Dark Alliance Part 2. The room stayed silent after the delegation of Grindelwald's supporters had left, their words lingering like a heavy cloud. Voldemort's gaze swept across his followers, his voice breaking the silence as he began to speak, almost as though he were lost in thought. Their offer has its advantages and disadvantages, he said, his tone calm yet filled with power. But I am inclined to accept them into our fold. They would be foolish, no, suicidal to even think of betraying me. Their loyalty will either serve my purpose or cost them their lives. Either way, I win. Edwin Traverse hesitated before speaking, his voice cautious. My lord, can Grindelwald be trusted to ally with us? And what if his followers betray us later? Voldemort's lips curled into a thin smile, though it held no warmth. He turned his piercing gaze toward Traverse, his tone calm but with an undercurrent of menace. Grindelwald, he said, almost mocking the name. He is a relic of the past, a man whose ambitions failed long ago. Even if he were in his prime, he would not be a match for me. Now, weakened by years of captivity, he is nothing more than a tool, one I will use or discard as I see fit. The room felt colder as Voldemort's voice dropped, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. As for his followers, betrayal is always a possibility. But fear is a powerful leash. They will see what happens to those who oppose me, and they will think twice before acting against us. If Grindelwald or his followers show disloyalty, I will crush them without hesitation. The Death Eaters exchanged uneasy glances, none daring to speak. Voldemort's tone shifted, becoming sharp and commanding. We will not act blindly. Their claims must be verified before I decide their worth. McNair, he barked, his eyes locking onto the burly Death Eater. You will gather information on Grindelwald's location. I want to know exactly where he is being held, who guards him, and how secure his prison truly is. Be subtle. Do not let your actions draw attention. If you fail. He paused, letting the unspoken threat linger. McNair bowed low, his voice steady. It will be done, my lord. Yaxley, Voldemort addressed, turning his gaze upon him. Increase our efforts within the ministry. The more influence we have there, the better positioned we'll be to act when the time comes. Yes, my lord, Yaxley responded promptly, his face set with determination. Voldemort's eyes swept over the room, his expression cold and commanding. Remember, our primary goal remains unchanged. We must rebuild our forces and prepare for the right moment to strike. Do not let these new developments distract you from your duties. Once I have the prophecy and understand its contents fully, we will move to seize control. I do not wish to be caught off guard by any unexpected challenges this time." The Death Eaters nodded, murmuring their agreement with varying degrees of confidence. None dared to voice doubts. "Dismissed," Voldemort commanded sharply. As they filed out of the chamber, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor, Voldemort remained seated, lost in thought. The possibility of freeing Grindelwald presented both an opportunity and a risk. Aligning with another Dark Lord could exponentially increase his power, but he was not certain whether Grindelwald would submit to him. The heavy silence of the chamber lingered after the Death Eater's departure. Voldemort sat motionless, his mind a labyrinth of strategies and contingencies. The flickering candles cast elongated shadows, their dim light reflecting off his pale skin. A subtle rustling caught his attention. From the shadows near the wall, a familiar figure emerged. Severus Snape stepped forward, his black robes billowing slightly as he moved. He approached and knelt before Voldemort, his head bowed. "My lord," Snape began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I bring news from the Order's meeting." Voldemort turned slightly, his red eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Speak." "The Order has fractured," Snape reported. "The Elder Potter, Black, and several others have broken away from Dumbledore's leadership. They disagreed vehemently with his decision to investigate the mysterious wizard from the graveyard." A cold smile spread across Voldemort's features. "Most interesting. Tell me more." Snape continued, choosing his words carefully. "During the meeting, Dumbledore expressed his intent to locate and possibly apprehend the wizard who intervened during your resurrection. Hadrian Potter opposed this plan openly, arguing that the individual saved his brother Charles's life and should not be pursued." Voldemort leaned forward slightly. "And how did Dumbledore respond?" "He maintained that such unchecked power is dangerous," Snape replied. The disagreement escalated. Potter accused Dumbledore of manipulation and questioned his motives. Sirius Black and others sided with Potter. The confrontation led to a split within the Order. Voldemort's satisfaction grew. This internal conflict among his enemies could only serve his purposes. "So, the Order is divided. Dumbledore's influence wanes." "It appears so, my lord," Snape confirmed. Voldemort regarded Snape thoughtfully. "And what of the others? How many left with Potter and Black?" "Besides them, Nymphadora Tonks and the Longbottoms have distanced themselves from the Order's current direction. They expressed distrust in Dumbledore's leadership." Voldemort's eyes narrowed. "The Longbottoms, interesting. Their departure weakens Dumbledore further. This division may prove advantageous." Snape hesitated before speaking again. "However, my lord, Potter's power has grown significantly. During the confrontation, he displayed a level of magical strength that surprised many." Voldemort's expression darkened momentarily. "Yes, Hadrian Potter. He has been a thorn in my side. His abilities are unexpected, but he is young and inexperienced. He can be dealt with in time." "Indeed, my lord," Snape agreed. "But he is not to be underestimated." "Indeed," Voldemort agreed, his voice cold. "But divided, they are weaker. We must exploit this rift." "Shall I continue to monitor the situation, my lord?" Snape inquired. "Yes," Voldemort affirmed. "Maintain your position within the Order. Feed them information that will deepen their divisions. Keep me informed of any developments." "As you wish," Snape replied, bowing his head. "You may go," Voldemort dismissed him with a flick of his hand. Snape rose smoothly and retreated into the shadows, disappearing as silently as he had come. Alone once more, Voldemort contemplated the unfolding events. His enemies were numerous and formidable, the wizard who had thwarted his attempt at the Philosopher's Stone, the two who had struck during the World Cup, the one who had decimated his forces at the graveyard, Hadrian Potter, and of course, Dumbledore himself. Individually, he could handle them, but united, that was another matter entirely. Their division was fortunate, but he couldn't rely on it lasting forever. Perhaps accepting Grindelwald's followers' offer wasn't just advantageous, it was necessary. The old Dark Lord's followers, combined with the vampire's allegiance, could tip the balance decisively in his favor. Rising from his chair, he moved to the window, gazing out at the dark, wind-swept grounds. His pale fingers traced the edge of the windowsill as he considered his next move. Yes, he would meet with Grindelwald's followers again. He would free Grindelwald, and either bend the old Dark Lord to his will or eliminate him. Either way, his followers and their resources would become Voldemort's. As a cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the flickering candles and plunging the room into darkness, a thin smile spread across Voldemort's face. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, the wizarding world would tremble before him once more. Chapter 295, Unseen Maneuvers. Unaware of Voldemort's schemes and the shifting tides in the wizarding world, Harry immersed himself in his rigorous training in the dark arts under the tutelage of Arcturus Black at Black Castle. The ritual chamber in Black Castle thrummed with dark energy as Harry worked through another intricate curse under Arcturus's sharp gaze. Days had passed since the fateful order meeting, and Harry had thrown himself into his training with relentless focus. Dark wisps of magic coiled around his wand as he executed the final movement of the spell. The practice dummy before him quaked violently before crumpling into a heap, its core completely shattered. Better, Arcturus nodded approvingly. You're maintaining control even as the power increases. The cleansing rituals are working well. He stepped closer, his tone shifting to one of caution. But you're pushing yourself too hard, Harry. Power is only useful when balanced. If you lose control, the darkness will consume you. Harry glanced up, offering a faint smile. I know. That's why I take breaks. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about visiting Fleur in France again soon. Arcturus nodded approvingly. A wise decision. Time away will clear your mind and keep you centered. Even the strongest wizards need respite to stay sharp. Harry lowered his wand, taking slow breaths to center himself. Despite his focus on training, whispers of the Order's movements occasionally reached him. He knew they continued their misguided mission to guard the prophecy, clinging to their crumbling ideals. Grimmauld Place remained their headquarters, but Harry felt no urge to interfere. Their choices and consequences were no longer his concern. The deterioration of his relationship with Dumbledore didn't concern him much either. They'd never been close, to begin with. However, Dumbledore's retaliation, when it came, was both petty and unexpected. One evening, as Harry was finishing his daily cleansing ritual in the quiet of the Black Castle, a sharp knock echoed through the hall. Moments later, Professor Flitwick arrived, practically trembling with indignation. Harry. Flitwick began without preamble, his voice unusually sharp. Why would you decline the head boy position? Do you have any idea what you're giving up? The private quarters, the status, the responsibilities that could shape your future career. Harry blinked in confusion. Professor, I haven't declined anything. In fact, I was hoping to get the position. Flitwick froze, his brow furrowing as he processed Harry's response. But, during this morning's staff meeting, when we discussed the appointments, Dumbledore explicitly stated that you declined just as you did with the prefect position. I never. Harry's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. This is Dumbledore's revenge for what happened at the order meeting, isn't it? Flitwick's sharp gaze met Harry's. Explain, he demanded, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced with stern determination. Harry recounted the confrontation at Grimmauld Place in detail, his argument with Dumbledore, his rejection of the man's authority, and the subsequent division it caused in the order. As Harry spoke, Flitwick's expression grew darker and darker. That is utterly unprofessional. Flitwick erupted, his small frame practically vibrating with outrage. To weaponize a school position against a student because of personal grievances? It's disgraceful. I'll see this corrected immediately, Harry. The position is rightfully yours, and I'll make sure the rest of the staff knows the truth. Thank you, Professor, Harry said sincerely, though he could see Flitwick was far from calm. Hoping to ease his mentor's frustration, he suggested they move on to more pleasant matters. For the next hour, the pair discussed advanced charm theory, their shared passion gradually replacing the tension in the room. When Flitwick proposed a practical demonstration, Harry eagerly agreed. Under the starlit sky, master and apprentice dueled, their spells lighting up the night. Flitwick nodded approvingly at Harry's progress before departing with a final promise. Expect your head boy badge with your letter, Harry. I'll see this matter settled properly. The next morning, Sirius enacted his own form of revenge. The Order members arriving at Grimmauld Place found themselves caught in an elaborate paint bomb trap that left no one, not even Dumbledore, untouched. Bright, multicolored paint erupted through the rooms, splattering every surface and covering everyone in vivid hues. Chaos broke out instantly. What in Merlin's name? Molly Weasley shrieked, furiously trying to wipe blue paint off her face. Dumbledore stood at the center of the commotion, his once stately robes dripping with a kaleidoscope of colors. His expression was calm, almost bemused, but there was a subtle tension in his gaze that betrayed a flicker of irritation beneath the surface as he surveyed the mess. While the others spluttered and scrambled for their wands, attempting cleaning spells that mysteriously failed, Sirius appeared at the top of the staircase, grinning like a madman. "Good morning, everyone," he called cheerfully. "Lovely day for a splash of color, don't you think?" "Sirius Black!" Molly Weasley shrieked, her hair and robes splattered with neon colors. "This is outrageous." "Is it?" Sirius replied with a sharp grin. "Sort of like using one's position as headmaster to spite a student." He leaned casually against the banister as he explained Dumbledore's actions concerning Harry and the head boy position. A heavy silence fell over the room as all eyes turned to Dumbledore. Even beneath the splatters of paint, the discomfort in his expression was clear. The great Albus Dumbledore, caught in an act of petty revenge against a student, it wasn't a good look. Molly huffed, crossing her arms. "Regardless of the reasons, Sirius, covering us all in paint isn't the solution." Sirius shrugged, his grin undeterred. "Maybe not, but it was worth it." Dash. Back at the Black Castle, Harry couldn't stop laughing when Sirius showed him a magical photograph of the aftermath. The image captured the room frozen mid-chaos, with a particularly furious Snape glaring daggers at Sirius from under a coat of bright purple paint. "You really outdid yourself," Harry chuckled, shaking his head. Sirius leaned back in his chair, his laughter uncontrollable. "Look at Dung's face. And Snape, I didn't even know it was possible for him to look more miserable." Dash. Life continued its pattern. Harry divided his time between training with Arcturus and visits to France, where he helped Fleur with her curse-breaking studies while she helped him maintain his balance against dark magic's influence. The head boy situation remained unresolved, though Harry took the lack of news as a positive sign. He trusted that Professor Flitwick would handle the situation. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Harry, Dumbledore had bigger problems to take care of. Rumors began swirling in the Daily Prophet about his mismanagement at Hogwarts, with scathing articles dredging up past incidents from the Philosopher's Stone fiasco to the Chamber of Secrets, and most recently, the Triwizard Tournament debacle. To the public, it was proof that Dumbledore was losing his touch. At the Ministry, whispers grew louder. Minister Fudge seized the opportunity to undermine Dumbledore, pushing for his removal from the position of Chief Warlock of the Wisen gamat. The vote to remove Dumbledore as Chief Warlock succeeded with unprecedented support from both dark-aligned and neutral families. Watching from the family seats, Harry and Sirius exchanged worried glances. The dark faction shouldn't have had this much influence, not after the deaths of so many prominent Death Eaters. "Voldemort's been busy," Harry murmured, his voice low. His mind raced, piecing together possibilities. "He's found new allies." "Strong ones," Sirius agreed grimly. "The neutrals never vote as a bloc unless someone's pulling strings behind the scenes." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. He'd need to investigate this new development thoroughly. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard by Voldemort's machinations again. As they left the Wisen-Gamat chamber, Harry could feel the political landscape shifting beneath their feet. The game was changing, and he needed to identify the new players fast before Voldemort's next move caught him unaware. Chapter 296, Gathering Intelligence. Harry paced the length of the Black Castle's Grand Library, the weight of recent events pressing heavily on his mind. The news of Dumbledore's sudden ousting from the Wisen-Gamat had caught him off guard. Though he didn't particularly like the old man, Harry knew this move would destabilize the Ministry further, leaving it vulnerable to Voldemort's influence. He'd underestimated just how quickly the Dark Lord could regroup after the devastating blow at the graveyard. How did he regain influence so quickly? Harry muttered, frustration clear in his voice. He had assumed that with most of Voldemort's inner circle eliminated, the Dark Lord's recovery would take months, if not years. Yet reality was proving far more unsettling. Sirius, who had followed him back from the Wisen-Gamat meeting, leaned against a bookshelf. "This development is worrying," he admitted, his tone grim. "I thought all they could manage right now was currying Fudge's favor and stirring up minor trouble. But gaining more than half the Wisen-Gamat's support? That's serious. Who knows what other policies they'll try to push through now?" Harry stopped pacing and turned to his godfather. "We need to investigate. Sirius, I need that list of Fudge's new friends." Without a word, Sirius pulled a folded parchment from his pocket and handed it to Harry. I've been keeping an eye on them. Here's everyone I've noted so far. Unfolding the parchment, Harry scanned the list. Several familiar family names jumped out, old pure-blood houses with dark reputations, but he recognized only a handful. Thanks, Sirius. This is exactly what I needed, Harry said, his voice steady with determination. What's your plan? Sirius asked, eyeing him warily. I need to find out what Voldemort's up to, Harry replied simply. Sirius straightened immediately, his expression stern. No. I forbid you from following anyone directly to Voldemort's hideout. That's too dangerous. Harry shook his head. I'm not that reckless. I'll find one of the weaker ones and extract the information from their mind. With the invisibility cloak, it'll be low risk. Sirius frowned but didn't argue further. Fine, but promise me you'll share anything you learn. And don't rush into a fight. You might be stronger now, but Voldemort still has an army. Constant vigilance, Harry. Harry chuckled at his godfather's serious tone. All right. I promise I won't do anything stupid. Satisfied, Sirius left for Grimmauld Place, though his parting look carried a hint of worry. Once alone, Harry returned to the list Sirius had given him. His eyes settled on a name, Gregory Selwyn, a low-ranking ministry official with known Death Eater ties. Perfect, Harry murmured to himself. Selwyn's low status made him an ideal target. Unlike the higher-ranking Death Eaters, Selwyn was unlikely to have strong occlumency defenses. Probing his mind for answers would be easy and relatively safe. The alternative, following a new recruit directly to Voldemort, was far riskier. Even with the invisibility cloak, Harry couldn't be sure Voldemort hadn't set up defenses against such tactics after the graveyard incident. No, extracting information from someone like Selwyn was smarter. Voldemort's inner circle might be tight, but lower-ranking followers often overheard things they shouldn't. The Order, as usual, had been of little help. Kreaker's spying had yielded no useful information, and Harry doubted Dumbledore would share any secrets willingly. The old man always kept his cards close to his chest. Snape would have been the best source of information, but his occlumency skills were legendary. Trying to breach Snape's mind would almost certainly leave traces, alerting both him and Voldemort. Harry needed subtlety, not unnecessary risks. The next evening, under the cover of darkness, Harry prepared for his mission. With a thought, his bound cloak activated, rendering him invisible. There was no need for disguises. A few carefully cast spells to hide his traces later, and he was ready. Time to get to work, he muttered to himself. Operating to a secluded spot near Selwyn's residence, Harry kept to the shadows, observing the house from a distance. The neighborhood was quiet, and the house itself was modest, protected by only minimal wards. Too easy, Harry thought, his lips curling in mild disdain. With precise wand movements, he bypassed the wards effortlessly, ensuring he left no trace of his intrusion. Invisible and silent, Harry slipped into the house and settled in Selwyn's study, waiting patiently for his target to return. The door creaked open an hour later, and Selwyn stepped in. Before he could even set down his coat, a silent stunning spell struck him. The man crumpled to the floor without a sound. Harry moved swiftly, placing his wand against Selwyn's temple. Delving into the man's memories, he sifted through them with practiced efficiency. Useless, Harry growled under his breath, frustration bubbling up. Selwyn's knowledge was shallow surface details about the faction's recent influx of gold, the coordinated campaign to discredit Dumbledore, and the bought votes in the Wisen gamat. But the source of the gold? Selwyn had no idea. He was too low-ranking to know anything substantial. However, the memories did reveal something of value, the names of Voldemort's new inner circle. One name stood out sharply, Duncan McNair. We meet again, Harry murmured, recalling their brief but intense duel during the suspended Triwizard Tournament. McNair would know more. He had to. Harry decided then and there that he would be the next target. After carefully modifying Selwyn's memories to erase all traces of his presence, Harry left the house as silently as he'd entered, operating back to Black Castle to plan his next move. In the castle's study, Sirius was waiting, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. How did it go? Sirius asked as Harry stepped inside. Not as fruitful as I'd hoped, Harry admitted, setting his wand on the table. Selwyn didn't know much. I did confirm, though, that their faction recently came into a lot of gold. Any clue where it's coming from? Sirius pressed. Not yet, Harry replied, shaking his head. But I did learn something important. Duncan McNair is part of Voldemort's new inner circle. Sirius frowned, his jaw tightening. McNair, wasn't he the duelist you faced in the tournament a few years back? That's the one, Harry confirmed. He's my next target. I'll help you gather intelligence on him, Sirius offered, though his tone carried a warning. But McNair's a lot stronger than Selwyn. Be careful. I will, Harry assured him, his voice calm but resolute. In the days that followed, Harry kept a close watch on McNair's movements. However, approaching him proved to be far more difficult than he'd anticipated. McNair was careful, almost paranoid. He operated randomly, never staying in one place for long, and his home was conspicuously empty, suggesting he operated from a secret hideout. Harry spent hours observing, hoping for a moment of vulnerability, but McNair's movements were erratic and guarded. Catching him at his home or discovering his hideout would have made things much easier. For now, Harry decided to wait, biding his time. If patience failed, he'd have to take a bolder approach and confront McNair in the open, subduing him without raising suspicion. It wasn't ideal, but Harry wasn't ready to take unnecessary risks just yet. He had time. And he intended to use it wisely. Several nights later, as Harry pored over books on tracking spells in the library, a soft pop broke the silence. Myra, the Black Castle's ever-dutiful house elf, appeared, her white eyes sparkling with urgency. Master Harry, she squeaked, wringing her hands. One of your devices is making noise and shining. Harry raised an eyebrow, closing the book in front of him. Which device, Myra? She stepped forward, holding out a small coin that glowed faintly and emitted a soft hum. Harry's expression shifted as he recognized it immediately. The coin had been one of his creations during the Quirrellmort year at Hogwarts, a communication tool meant for the centaurs to alert him if unicorns were ever in danger. It had remained silent since his days of hunting acromantulas with the centaurs. Thank you, Myra, he said, taking the coin from her small hands. With another soft pop, Myra vanished, leaving Harry alone with the glowing coin. He examined it closely, running his fingers over the smooth, edged surface. The centaurs wouldn't contact him without good reason. It must be important, he muttered to himself. Stretching his stiff muscles, Harry stood and pocketed the coin. Looks like it's time to be Knight Arthur again, he said with a wry smile. He chuckled quietly as memories of his various disguises flickered through his mind. If I keep this up, I'll need an entire wardrobe just for my alter egos. He mentally ticked off the list: Knight Arthur, the persona he'd adopted to deal with Quirrell and the acromantulas, the American wizard and ninja guises during the Quidditch World Cup, and most recently, the mysterious wizard at the graveyard. I should be careful, he mused, his humor fading slightly. Too many powerful strangers appearing could start connecting dots. I'd rather remain scattered. Shrugging off the thought for now, Harry began to prepare. He fetched the Gryffindor family sword from its secure place. Using the real sword of Gryffindor was out of the question. It could lead to questions and potentially reveal more about his identity than he wanted. For this task, the family sword, though less powerful, would suffice. Time to see what the centaurs need, he said, fastening his cloak and adjusting his appearance to suit his old alias. Exiting Black Castle, Harry operated to the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where the moonlight bathed the treetops in a silvery glow. Chapter 297, The Knight's Return. The moon hung low over the treetops as Harry or Knight Arthur stood at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, just beyond Hogwarts' protective wards. The scent of damp earth and ancient trees filled his senses, blending with the rustling leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. With a simple thought, Harry floated off the ground, gliding silently just above the forest floor. He wove through the towering trees, following the path to the centaur colony, a route he knew by heart. Yet tonight, the forest felt different. The air was thick, the shadows darker, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. A sudden rustling to his left caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a massive acromantula skittering across the ground, its 8 gleaming eyes reflecting a sinister light. That's odd, Harry thought, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword. They're far from their nest. As he moved deeper into the forest, he noticed more acromantulas. They lurked in the trees, their webs glinting like silver traps in the moonlight. Seeing them this far from their territory was alarming. Something's wrong, he muttered, picking up speed. Ascending higher to avoid confrontation, he pressed onward. Whatever was happening, the centaurs would have answers. Minutes later, the forest opened into a starlit clearing. The centaur colony lay ahead, a seamless blend of tents and natural structures that harmonized with the environment. A group of centaurs stood waiting, their eyes turning toward Harry as he approached. At their center was Doran, the tribe's leader. His chestnut hair fell over his broad shoulders, and his gaze held both respect and concern. Around him stood familiar faces: Firenze, Ronan, and the ever-grumpy Bane. "Knight Arthur," Doran greeted, inclining his head. "We are grateful you answered our call." Harry touched down gracefully, nodding in return. "It's been a while, Doran. Good to see you. Though I see Bane's as cheerful as ever." Bane snorted but stayed silent, allowing Doran to step forward. "You came quickly," Doran noted. "Your message felt urgent," Harry replied, scanning the group. "The forest feels off tonight." "You've noticed," Doran said gravely. Harry nodded. "On my way here, I saw several acromantulas far from their nest." "What's happening?" Doran gestured to a log by the fire. "Sit with us, and we will explain." Harry settled by the fire, its warmth a sharp contrast to the cool night air. "The acromantulas have grown increasingly agitated," Doran began. "In recent years, the forest has been plagued by turmoil." Harry tilted his head. "Turmoil? I've been away. The only big event I have heard about is the Triwizard Tournament. That wouldn't have shaken the forest this much." Feigning ignorance, Harry maintained his disguise. The centaur's divination abilities might allow them to see through his real identity, but unless they addressed him directly, he wasn't about to reveal himself. Doran sighed, his face weary. "The tournament was just the latest disturbance. It started years ago. When you hunted the acromantulas, they grew wary. Then you know who returned, hunting unicorns for his dark rituals." Harry frowned. "That frightened them." "Terrified them," Doran confirmed. "Then the basilisk awakened from the Chamber of Secrets, spreading fear throughout the forest." Firenze added, "The next year, Dementors stationed at Hogwarts cast their despair over the forest, unsettling every creature." "And last year brought dragons," Doran said, exasperated. "Dragons?" Harry repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Doran said. "The acromantulas thought the dragons were new residents and feared becoming prey. They moved their nest closer to the forest's edge." Ronan chimed in, "Then wizards entered the forest, capturing some acromantulas for the tournament tasks. They feel hunted." Harry sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Sounds like they've been through a lot." Doran nodded solemnly. "Now they trust no one. They've grown aggressive, expanding their territory and attacking anything in their path. They've even begun encroaching on our lands." Firenze added, "We tried reasoning with them, but they no longer listen." Harry leaned forward. "So you called me?" "Yes," Doran confirmed. "The stars tell us the acromantulas won't be allies. With the chaos in the wizarding world, they could become a threat to Hogwarts and its students." Harry's gaze hardened. "Is Dumbledore ignoring this?" "We rarely see him now," Doran admitted. "He's likely preoccupied with you-know-who's return. We can't depend on his help." "Understood," Harry said. "I had hoped to give the acromantulas time, but it seems we're out of options." Doran placed a firm hand on Harry's shoulder. "Our tribe will support you." "Thank you," Harry said sincerely. "I'll deal with the main nest. If your tribe can handle the stragglers, that'll save time." "We will do our part," Doran promised. "The nest is formidable," Firenze cautioned. "Are you sure you don't need help?" A small smile tugged at Harry's lips beneath his helmet. "I've grown stronger since our last encounter. Trust me." The centaurs exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of hope and concern. "Very well," Doran said at last. "May the stars guide you." Rising to his feet, Harry drew the Gryffindor family sword. The blade glinted faintly in the firelight, its edge sharp and ready. "I'll return when it's done," he said, his voice steady. With a final nod to the centaurs, Harry ascended into the night, flying swiftly toward the nest. The dark forest stretched out below him, waiting to reveal its secrets. Dash! The forest blurred beneath Harry as he flew, his senses heightened for any movement. Acromantulas emerged from the shadows, their massive forms lunging toward him with deadly precision. Harry flicked his wand in quick bursts, sending precise jets of flame to incinerate them on the spot. "One less problem," he muttered after each strike, leaving behind smoldering remains as he continued toward the nest. The density of spiders increased as he approached the clearing. The air grew heavier with the stench of decay, and the webbing between the trees became thicker, forming a ghastly tapestry of silk and death. At last, Harry reached the nest. The clearing ahead revealed a sprawling, monstrous structure, a chaotic mass of webs, bones, and debris, towering ominously among the trees. Thousands of acromantulas swarmed over the nest and the surrounding area, their chittering creating a haunting chorus that filled the night. Doran wasn't exaggerating, Harry whispered. His gaze swept over the nest, assessing the overwhelming number of spiders. This is far worse than before. And to think it all started with Hagrid freeing Aragog into this forest. Hovering above the scene, Harry considered his options. Large-scale destructive spells would eliminate the threat quickly, but they'd also ravage the forest at an unacceptable cost. I'll have to do this the hard way, he decided grimly. Sheathing his sword for the moment, Harry reached into his enchanted pouch and pulled out 2 practice dummies, the kind he often used for spell work. Placing them on a nearby branch, he unsheathed a small blade and made a shallow cut on his palm. As long as this works, I'll have the support I need, he thought, blood dripping onto his palm. Using his blood, Harry drew intricate runic circles on the dummies' foreheads. As the symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with arcane energy, he took a deep breath and began to chant in a low voice. The ancient words rolled off his tongue, each syllable resonating with power. The air around him crackled with raw magic as the dummies began to shift and morph. Wood and fabric transformed into flesh and armor, and moments later, 2 identical figures stood before him, perfect replicas of himself. This spell was one of Harry's latest creations, a dark clone spell that combined transfiguration and blood magic to produce temporary clones of himself. The clones, while only retaining about 20% of his strength, were still more than capable of handling tonight's battle. Yet, the spell had its drawbacks. The clones could not cast spells, relying solely on physical combat. For someone like Harry, with his knightly prowess, this limitation wasn't a concern. More problematic, however, was that the clones bore his unmasked face and required his proximity to function. They couldn't be controlled remotely. There was a way to overcome these issues, but Harry dismissed it outright. I'm not splitting my soul for a remote-controlled army, he muttered, shaking his head. That path leads to madness, and I'm not Voldemort. To resolve the issue of their exposed faces, Harry pulled out 2 plain masks from his pouch and handed them to the clones. They slipped them on without a word, ready to follow his lead into battle. Satisfied, Harry unsheathed 2 spare swords and handed them over. A knight without a collection of swords is no knight at all, he quipped to himself, smirking. Once armed, the clones moved into position. Harry stayed in the air, observing their progress as he coordinated their actions. The fight began in earnest as the trio descended upon the nest. The clones moved with precision, cutting through the tide of spiders with devastating efficiency. One clone leapt into the fray, slashing through silk and fangs, while the other delivered crushing blows that scattered groups of acromantulas. From above, Harry cast controlled jets of flame, targeting clusters of spiders while avoiding damage to the surrounding trees. Each spell sent plumes of smoke and the acrid stench of burning chitin into the air. The clones, despite their limited strength, performed admirably under Harry's guidance. Their movements were sharp, their strikes deliberate, and their presence allowed Harry to focus on eliminating larger groups of spiders from a distance. As the battle raged, the nest itself began to collapse under the assault. With each wave of spiders falling, the structure grew more exposed. The trio of Harrys worked in perfect harmony, cutting through the infestation with surgical efficiency. The hunt had begun anew, and this time, Harry resolved, the forest would finally be free from the acromantula's reign of terror. Chapter 298, Aragog's Last Stand. As the clones fought tirelessly against the swarm of acromantulas, Harry landed in a clear patch of ground to catch his breath. As a lone vigilante, he knew better than to push himself to exhaustion. He needed to save his strength for whatever unexpected danger might arise. Staying prepared was always part of his strategy. The ground beneath his boots was damp and cool, and the sharp scent of burning spiders mingled unpleasantly with the earthy aroma of the forest. Overhead, the canopy of the forbidden forest swayed gently, oddly serene compared to the chaos below. Harry's gaze shifted to his clones, darting skillfully between the trees. Each clone wielded a sword identical to his own, their movements precise and calculated. Even at a fraction of his full strength, they handled the lesser acromantulas with ease, cutting them down swiftly. The shrieks of the dying spiders barely registered in Harry's mind. I wish this could be over already, he thought, his eyes scanning the battlefield. But at least this way, the forest is spared unnecessary destruction. Despite the efficiency of his approach, frustration gnawed at him. These creatures, while dangerous to most, no longer challenged him. He had surpassed them long ago, both in skill and strategy. This wasn't a test of his abilities, it was just a tedious chore. As Harry monitored his clones, their blades gleaming in the moonlight, his thoughts wandered. His training as a knight had taken him far, but he craved the next step, the transformation from knight to great knight. To reach that milestone, he needed greater foes, enemies that would truly test his limits. The real test will come soon enough, he reminded himself, his hand instinctively brushing the hilt of his sword. Aragog, the ancient leader of the Acromantulas, had yet to make an appearance. Where Aragog hid, there were bound to be other formidable spiders, perhaps even descendants of the one that had once threatened Hogwarts. A faint rustling behind him broke his train of thought. Harry turned to see Doran approaching, flanked by a few members of his centaur tribe. The centaur leader's expression was a mix of awe and curiosity as he watched the clones systematically cutting down the spiders. "Why are you here?" Harry asked, his voice steady. "Even though you insisted you didn't need help, I was concerned," Doran replied, his deep voice carrying a note of caution. "But it seems my worries were unnecessary." "Who are they?" "Clones," Harry replied simply. "Mine." Doran's gaze lingered on the clones, his admiration evident as he observed their flawless movements. "It's incredible that they can fight like this. Your kind would probably call this dark magic, wouldn't they?" Harry met his gaze steadily. "Some of my people would call you dark creatures as well. Labels don't matter to me. Actions do. As long as I'm not doing anything evil, I'm not concerned about the methods I use." Doran's tail flicked thoughtfully. "Still, be cautious with such magic. I've seen wizards lose themselves when they relied on it too much." "I appreciate the concern," Harry replied sincerely. "I take precautions. My travels have taught me the importance of balance. I could have destroyed this nest in a much more direct way, but using these clones lets me deal with the Acromantulas without causing unnecessary damage to the forest." The centaur nodded slowly. "Very well. Since I'm here, we will help where we can. My tribe will handle the ones trying to flee." "Thank you," Harry said. They stood together, watching as the clones continued their systematic extermination. The centaurs moved with speed and precision, their arrows finding the stray Acromantulas that tried to escape into the shadows of the forest. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the ground. From the depths of the nest, larger and more menacing spiders emerged. Their massive bodies glistened in the moonlight, legs bristling with thick hair, and eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. "Looks like the real challenge has arrived," Harry remarked, a hint of anticipation in his voice. Doran's eyes widened in recognition. "That one, that's Aragog." Harry focused on the largest of the three newcomers, its enormous carapace scarred from countless battles. It was easily twice the size of the others. "So, that's Hagrid's old friend," he murmured. The spiders advanced deliberately, their movements slow and calculated. Even the clones paused. Harry knew that they could not handle the newcomers. Aragog's voice echoed across the clearing, deep and rasping, carrying a chilling undertone. "Who dares to slaughter my children?" "I do," Harry declared, stepping forward with calm defiance. "Your colony has become a menace to the forest. I'm here to put an end to it." Aragog's mandibles clicked furiously. You're the one who has been hunting us. The one who murdered my offspring." Harry met the spider's gaze unflinchingly. "Yes. But only because your kind nearly attacked the school and threatened innocent lives. You allowed one of your own to rebel, endangering others. I did what was necessary to protect my school. After you destroyed the rebel nest, why continue the slaughter?" Aragog demanded, his multitude of eyes blazing with fury. "To control your population," Harry replied evenly. "Your numbers were growing unchecked. I knew that once you were gone, others might rise to take your place and they wouldn't honor the agreement you made with Hagrid. I couldn't risk it." Aragog let out a low hiss. "You speak of control, yet you bring destruction. You humans are all the same." "This is your doing," Harry shot back. "You expanded aggressively, ignoring the centaur tribe's warnings. You left me no choice. This forest has been my home for decades." Aragog bellowed. "You cannot decide our fate. A home you've outgrown," Harry countered. "Your colony is too large and too dangerous to be so close to Hogwarts. It ends tonight." One of the other giant acromantulas stepped forward, venom dripping from its fangs. We will feast on your bones. You're welcome to try, Harry challenged. Doran placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Are you sure you don't need assistance? Harry glanced at him, a faint smile playing under his helmet. I appreciate it, but this is my fight. Just keep an eye on the outskirts. Very well, Doran conceded. We'll watch your back. The centaurs retreated to the edge of the clearing, bows at the ready for any stray threats. Harry drew his sword, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. He steadied his stance, muscles coiled and ready. Shall we begin? Aragog reared up on his hind legs, towering over Harry like a living nightmare. You will pay for the lives you've taken. With a deafening screech, the three acromantulas charged. Harry moved like a shadow, dodging the first swipe of Aragog's massive leg. The ground quaked beneath the impact. He ducked under a venomous snap from the second spider, feeling the rush of air as its fangs narrowly missed. With precise timing, he slashed at its underbelly, releasing a spray of dark ichor. The injured spider, however, didn't falter. It fought as if the wound were inconsequential. Your kind always underestimates us, Aragog taunted, circling with predatory grace. We are not mere beasts. No, Harry agreed, parrying another strike. You're intelligent, which makes your actions even worse. You knew the danger you posed, yet you kept breeding and expanding. The third spider lunged from behind, but Harry sensed it coming. He spun, conjuring a shimmering shield to block the torrent of venom. The acidic spray hissed as it hit the barrier, dissipating harmlessly. Impressive, Aragog admitted grudgingly. But you cannot defeat us all. Watch me, Harry replied, determination gleaming in his eyes. The deadly battle unfolded in a blur of movement and steel. Harry's sword left shallow cuts on Aragog's legs, each one weakening the massive spider's mobility. The two other acromantulas coordinated their attacks, attempting to flank him. Your numbers won't save you, Harry said, deflecting their strikes with fluid precision. I've faced worse. Arrogant human. One spider hissed. We'll tear you apart. Harry smirked. You'll have to catch me first. Leaping into the air, he used magic to propel himself above them. From his elevated position, he cast a powerful binding spell. Tendrils of shimmering light shot downward, wrapping around one of the spiders and pinning it to the ground. The immobilized spider thrashed violently. Release me. Not happening, Harry said coolly. Aragog took advantage of Harry's distraction, spitting a thick web to ensnare him mid-air. Harry reacted swiftly, conjuring a fiery barrier. The web ignited on contact, disintegrating into ash. You'll need better tricks than that, Harry taunted. Below, his clones continued battling the smaller acromantulas with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, Doran and the centaurs provided cover, their arrows striking down any spider attempting to flee. Frustrated, the second giant spider slammed its legs into the earth, sending a shockwave that disrupted Harry's landing. He stumbled, giving Aragog an opening. The ancient spider lunged, fangs aimed directly at Harry's chest. At the last moment, Harry sidestepped and slashed upward, his blade slicing through one of Aragog's eyes. The spider howled in pain, ichor oozing from the wound. You'll regret that. Aragog roared, his movements growing erratic and desperate. Not likely, Harry shot back, pressing his advantage with precise strikes to Aragog's weakened limbs. The third spider freed itself from the binding spell and rejoined the fight, coordinating with the second to corner Harry. Your end is near. They hissed in unison. Harry wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. Time to finish this. Closing his eyes briefly, he summoned his inner reserves. When he opened them, they burned with fierce determination. Channeling his magic, he infused his sword with radiant energy. The blade hummed with power, arcs of light dancing along its edge. Though only a knight, Harry mimicked the abilities of a great knight using his magic. With a sweeping motion, he unleashed a wave of energy. It surged forward, engulfing the two lesser spiders. They were thrown back, crashing through the trees before collapsing, motionless. Only Aragog remained, battered but unyielding. Why persist? Harry asked. You're old, your time is almost up. I fight for my children, Aragog rasped. For their right to exist. You fight for a lost cause, Harry said softly. But I respect your dedication. Aragog crouched low, preparing one final attack. Then respect this. He lunged with surprising speed, but Harry was ready. Time seemed to slow as Harry stepped forward, meeting the attack head-on. With a decisive swing, he drove his sword deep into Aragog's thorax, the blade piercing through. Aragog shuddered, his legs collapsing. His death cry echoed through the forest, silencing all other sounds. As he lay dying, Aragog's eyes dimmed. His voice was a faint whisper. "Please, spare my children." Harry withdrew his sword, his expression somber. "You were a good leader. Controlling a nest this size and keeping them from attacking Hogwarts wasn't easy. But I can't let this nest remain after you're gone. Still, I'll grant part of your wish. I'll relocate some of the smaller ones to Acromantula sanctuaries." Aragog's eyes flickered one last time. "Thank you." And with that, the ancient spider breathed his last. A heavy silence settled over the clearing. The remaining Acromantulas, seeing their leader fall, retreated into the shadows. Harry paid them no attention, trusting the centaurs to deal with the stragglers and make the forest free of the spiders. Doran stepped forward, placing a hand over his heart. "It is done." Harry nodded solemnly. "Yes. The immediate threat has been dealt with." Raising his hand, Doran signaled into the forest. From the surrounding trees, the rest of the centaur tribe emerged. They moved swiftly and efficiently, beginning the task of clearing out the remaining Acromantulas and securing the area. Harry turned to his clones. "We have another task." The clones approached silently, awaiting his command. "Collect anything valuable: venom sacs, silk, anything useful. Nothing goes to waste." The clones immediately set to work, carefully harvesting from the fallen spiders. Their movements were methodical, ensuring every resource was properly collected. As they worked, Doran approached Harry once more. "You fought honorably." "Thank you," Harry replied. "I only wish it hadn't come to this. They were too close to the school and far too dangerous." "Sometimes, difficult choices must be made for the greater good," Doran observed. Harry sighed as he sheathed his sword. "I don't like that phrase. But making choices is never easy. No matter what you do, someone will think it was selfish. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am." He muttered the last part under his breath. Though his goal had been to protect the school and the forest, he couldn't deny the battle also served his own purposes, advancing his training and acquiring valuable resources. Still, he chose not to dwell on it. He knew he wasn't perfect and never claimed to be. Doran studied him thoughtfully. "Your actions tonight have saved many lives, including those of my tribe. We are in your debt." "You owe me nothing," Harry insisted. "It's my family's duty to protect this forest and the school. When I accepted my inheritance, I took on that responsibility." Doran smiled faintly. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years. Perhaps there's hope for unity between our kinds after all." "Maybe one day," Harry said with a small shrug. "When the new generation replaces the old, narrow-minded ones in the ministry. Until then, all we can do is hope." The night wore on as the clones finished their work. They returned to Harry, carrying carefully sealed containers filled with their harvested materials. Harry secured the items in his enchanted pouch, ensuring everything was properly contained. He also spared a few smaller Acromantulas, capturing them in a cage. He planned to sell them to farms or release them into the dark forest, honoring Aragog's last wish. Doran gestured toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to break. "A new day approaches." "So it does," Harry replied. "Will you stay longer?" the centaur asked. "I can't," Harry said. "There are other matters that need my attention." Doran extended his hand. "Know that you are always welcome among us." Harry clasped his forearm firmly. "Thank you. If you ever need my help, you know how to find me." "Safe travels, Knight Arthur." "Farewell, Doran." Harry turned to his clones. "You can rest now." With a simple gesture, he dispelled the magic sustaining them. The clones shimmered briefly before reverting to their original forms, practice dummies. Taking a final look around the clearing, Harry spread his arms and ascended into the sky. The cool morning air rushed past him as he soared above the treetops. He had much on his mind, but what he needed most was rest. Unfortunately, rest would have to wait. As he neared the edge of the forest and the boundary of Hogwarts wards, a blinding flash of fire erupted in front of him. Startled, Harry halted mid-air, shielding his eyes from the brightness. When the flames died down, an all too familiar figure emerged, a tall, bearded old man in flamboyant robes, his eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. Chapter 299, The Knight and the Headmaster Part 1. The morning sun began to peek over the horizon, casting a golden hue over the treetops of the Forbidden Forest. Hovering just outside the Hogwarts wards, Harry, still disguised as Knight Arthur, found himself suddenly confronted by a burst of flames as Albus Dumbledore appeared, carried by Fawkes the Phoenix. The magnificent bird's eyes locked with Harry's for a fleeting moment, and Harry could have sworn he saw a glimmer of recognition in them. Fawkes let out a soft, melodious trill, a sound that seemed to carry a gentle plea, almost as if urging Harry to show mercy to the old headmaster. Then, with another flash of flames, the Phoenix vanished, leaving Dumbledore alone to face Harry. Beneath his helm, Harry allowed himself a small, knowing smile. This encounter had been inevitable, perhaps even overdue. After their clash at the Order meeting and Dumbledore's petty revenge with the head boy position, the old man clearly needed a reminder that he wasn't infallible. Still, Harry had no desire to harm him seriously, just enough to bruise his ego and deliver a lesson in humility. Harry knew he could end this quickly if he wanted. There were dozens of lethal spells that could overcome a wizard of Dumbledore's age. But that wasn't his way, not with someone who, despite his manipulations and mistakes, still stood against the darkness. Dumbledore wasn't evil, just flawed and sometimes misguided in his methods. Harry would have his fun, make his point, and leave the headmaster unharmed. Dumbledore's eyes, usually filled with a gentle twinkle, now bore a sharp intensity. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice firm yet curious. "And what business do you have at my school?" Harry tilted his head slightly, a playful smirk hidden beneath his helmet. "Good morning to you too, Headmaster Dumbledore," he replied, his tone light. "Shouldn't you be occupied elsewhere? I'm just a knight tending to matters in the forest." Dumbledore's gaze narrowed. "A knight, you say? In this day and age? I thought your kind were the stuff of legend. Which knightly family do you hail from?" Harry reached behind him and unsheathed his sword. Its blade shimmered with ancient runes as it caught the light. "The Gryffindor family," he announced, his voice steady. Dumbledore's eyebrows arched in surprise. "The Gryffindor family? Are you claiming kinship with the Potters?" Harry chuckled softly. "You British wizards practice the system that when a family line produces a squib, the family dies. You know that is not true, right? You know magic has a funny way of re-emerging generations later. I come from one of those forgotten lines." Dumbledore studied him closely, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating. And yet, your presence here is unauthorized. Hogwarts and the Forbidden Forest are under my protection." "Funny," Harry remarked, glancing back toward the forest. "It didn't seem very protected when I found it crawling with acromantulas ready to spill onto the grounds." Dumbledore's expression remained calm, though his eyes darkened slightly. "The affairs of this school and its surroundings are my responsibility. I cannot allow unknown figures to meddle, especially not now, with dangers lurking everywhere." Harry chuckled, his tone deliberately casual. "Unknown figures? That's a bit harsh. Think of me as freelance pest control." "Your flippancy does little to ease my concerns," Dumbledore retorted. "Identify yourself, or I will be forced to intervene." "Ah, but where's the fun in that?" Harry teased. "A little mystery keeps life interesting, don't you think?" Dumbledore's patience was clearly thinning. "Enough games. State your purpose plainly, or face the consequences." Harry sighed theatrically. "Very well, if you must know. I was ensuring the safety of your students by dealing with a rather large spider problem, one that, might I add, should have been addressed by Hogwarts' esteemed headmaster." A flicker of unease crossed Dumbledore's face. "Aragog, is he alive?" "No," Harry said bluntly. "He fought well, though." Dumbledore let out a heavy sigh. "Hagrid will be heartbroken. I can't, like you, prioritize one person's feelings over the safety of the entire school," Harry replied coldly. "Your inability to act put countless lives at risk." "Mind your tone," Dumbledore warned, his voice hardening. "You tread dangerous ground." "Only because the acromantulas made it so," Harry shot back. "But you'll be happy to know I've tidied up your backyard for you." Dumbledore stepped forward, his robes billowing as though caught in an invisible wind. "You speak in riddles and evade my questions. I cannot let you leave until I have answers." "Is that so?" Harry replied, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. "And here I thought gratitude was in order." "Enough," Dumbledore declared, drawing his wand. You will reveal your identity, or I shall be forced to make you. Harry's eyes gleamed with mischief from behind his visor. Now we're getting somewhere. A friendly duel before breakfast? Don't mind if I do. Without further warning, Dumbledore flicked his wand, sending a jet of red light streaking toward Harry. Reacting swiftly, Harry sidestepped, the spell dissipating harmlessly against the forest floor. Impressive reflexes, Dumbledore admitted. But let's see how you handle this. He waved his wand in a complex motion, and the ground beneath Harry transformed into a mass of writhing vines, surging upward to ensnare his feet. With a fluid leap, Harry landed nimbly on a nearby tree branch. Nice try, he called down. But I've always been light on my feet. Dumbledore's eyes flashed with determination. You leave me no choice. He conjured a flock of fiery birds, each one diving toward Harry with blazing intensity. Drawing his sword, Harry met them head-on, the blade slicing through the constructs and dispersing them into sparks. Birds of fire? Creative, Harry remarked. But I've dealt with hotter situations. Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. You have skill, I'll give you that. But skill alone won't be enough. With a sweeping motion, he transfigured the surrounding trees into towering stone golems, their eyes glowing as they lumbered toward Harry. The ground trembled with each of their steps. Now this is more like it! Harry exclaimed, his voice laced with excitement. The first golem swung a massive fist at him, but Harry slid beneath it, delivering a precise slash to its leg. Cracks rippled across the stone as the golem faltered. The second one tried to corner him, but Harry vaulted over its shoulder, using his enhanced agility to his advantage. Landing behind it, he drove his sword into its back, and the creature crumbled into rubble. Dumbledore observed the display with a mix of awe and frustration. Who are you? He demanded, his voice rising with intensity. No ordinary wizard possesses such abilities. Harry laughed lightly. I'm a knight, remember? Hardly ordinary. But let's keep some mysteries alive, shall we? Very well, Dumbledore said grimly. If you won't reveal yourself willingly, I will have to subdue you. He raised his wand skyward, and dark clouds began to gather overhead. Thunder rumbled ominously as bolts of lightning arced down toward Harry. With confidence, Harry raised his sword, its blade acting as a lightning rod. The energy coursed through the metal, channeling harmlessly. With a swift motion, he redirected the lightning back toward Dumbledore, who barely erected a shield in time to deflect the attack. Sparks flew as the shield absorbed the impact, forcing Dumbledore back a few steps. Playing with lightning? That's a bit shocking, Harry quipped, a smirk audible in his voice. Dumbledore's lips tightened. Your wit is as sharp as your sword, but this ends now. He cast a complex spell, and the air around Harry shimmered and warped. Chains of pure magical energy materialized, shooting toward him from all directions. Harry spun his sword in a defensive arc, the blade glowing with power. The chains collided with its aura, shattering into nothingness. You're going to have to try harder, Harry teased. Dumbledore's frustration was palpable. So be it. With a grand gesture, he summoned a massive serpent of fire from the ground. It hissed menacingly, coiling around Harry in an attempt to constrict him. Fire again? Harry asked, unimpressed. You really need some new tricks. Focusing his energy, Harry imbued his sword with an icy blue glow. With a clean slash, he cut through the fiery serpent, extinguishing it in a burst of steam. Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly. Elemental manipulation through a sword, intriguing. Glad you're impressed, Harry replied casually. But if we're done here, I'd like to get on with my day. We are far from done, Dumbledore declared. He raised his wand again, forming a dome of crackling energy around Harry. The barrier began to shrink rapidly, intending to trap him. Reacting swiftly, Harry drove his sword into the ground, sending a shockwave rippling outward. The force disrupted the dome's formation. Using the momentum, he leaped forward, closing the gap between himself and Dumbledore. Landing a few paces away, Harry rested his sword on his shoulder. Your spells are impressive, but they lack a certain finesse. Dumbledore regarded him intently. You are skilled in both magic and combat. Few can claim such mastery. Flattery will get you nowhere, Harry said with a laugh. Perhaps it's time for you to concede. Not until I have answers, Dumbledore insisted. With surprising speed, he unleashed a barrage of spells, conjured chains, explosive bursts, and transfigured barriers. But Harry countered each attack with precision, navigating the onslaught effortlessly. His sword flashed as he deflected and neutralized every spell. Chapter 300, The Knight and the Headmaster Part 2. As the battle dragged on, Dumbledore began to show signs of fatigue. His breathing grew heavier, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his brow. Harry noticed and smirked beneath his helmet. "As you can see, you can't defeat me. I don't want to hurt you, old man. Can I leave now?" Dumbledore steadied himself, his voice still firm. "You are powerful. Were you the one who saved Charles from Voldemort's grasp that night? Are you talking about the rumor of a mysterious wizard rescuing Charles?" Harry asked casually. "Unfortunately, no. I wasn't even on the continent at the time. I only came here when I was notified that the forest needed my pest control services. Still, I'd like to meet that person. He has the qualities of a knight. It would be an honor to make his acquaintance." Dumbledore's piercing gaze didn't waver. "I feel you're hiding something. Tell me the truth." Harry chuckled darkly. "Says the man who thrives on secrets. Can I leave, or are you eager to lose?" Dumbledore's eyes flashed with renewed determination. "You leave me no choice, then." With a sweep of his wand, Dumbledore summoned a massive whirlwind, a vortex of wind and debris encircling Harry. The violent storm threatened to tear him apart. "Enough," Harry muttered. Planting his feet firmly, he channeled his magic into his sword once more. With a powerful slash, the whirlwind parted like water, the winds dissipating into nothingness. Before Dumbledore could recover, Harry closed the gap between them. In a swift, controlled motion, he struck the headmaster with the flat of his blade, sending him flying backward. Leveling his sword at Dumbledore, Harry held his ground but made no move to strike further. "It's over." Dumbledore lay where he had fallen, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Very well," he said wearily. "Do what you must." Harry sheathed his sword with a sigh. "I have no intention of harming you." From within his cloak, he pulled out a spare wand unremarkable and impossible to trace back to him. Pointing it at Dumbledore, he said calmly, "Stupefy." A jet of red light hit Dumbledore squarely, and he collapsed gently to the ground, unconscious. Turning to leave, Harry felt a faint mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. "That should keep you out of trouble for a bit," he muttered under his breath. As he began to walk away, a sudden surge of magic pulsed behind him. Harry spun around, his sword at the ready, to see Dumbledore stirring. The old man rose slowly, his eyes gleaming with determination. "You're resilient. I'll give you that," Harry remarked, shaking his head. Dumbledore straightened, standing tall despite his obvious fatigue. "I cannot allow you to leave without understanding who you are and what your intentions are." "Stubbornness must come with age," Harry quipped. "Or perhaps it's just your trademark." Without warning, Dumbledore unleashed a barrage of spells, each one more relentless than the last. Harry deflected them with ease, his movements fluid and precise, but the onslaught was relentless. "You're only delaying the inevitable," Harry called out, his voice tinged with exasperation. "Perhaps," Dumbledore replied, his tone resolute. "But I won't allow an unknown wizard to roam freely in this country during such troubled times." Harry sighed, raising his spare wand. "Very well." He fired a series of powerful stunning spells, each one forcing Dumbledore back a step. Though the headmaster fought valiantly to maintain his defense, the signs of exhaustion were evident. His movements slowed, his shield spells faltered, and his energy waned with every passing moment. Finally, with a well-aimed Expelliarmus, Harry disarmed Dumbledore. He expected the wand to fly into the bushes, giving him the opportunity to depart. But something entirely unexpected happened. Dumbledore's wand, which should have been flung aside, instead changed direction mid-air and soared straight into Harry's free hand. The moment his fingers closed around it, a surge of warmth coursed through him. The connection was instant, powerful, and ancient. Realization dawned, the Elder Wand had chosen him as its new master. "Well, that was unexpected," Harry muttered under his breath. Though the Elder Wand had always been in his plans, he hadn't been in any hurry to claim it. This was unintentional, yet fortuitous. Now, Harry held mastery over two of the Deathly Hallows. The Resurrection Stone, still cursed, remained hidden in the Gaunt home, well within his reach if he ever decided to retrieve it. But Harry had no immediate desire to become the Master of Death. The ring's curse was something he intended to avoid, though part of him was curious to see if Dumbledore's hubris would lead him to the same fate in this world. Harry didn't wish harm on Dumbledore, but if the man's arrogance ensnared him, Harry wouldn't intervene either. Dumbledore stared in shock. The wand, it has accepted you. Harry slipped the Elder Wand into his cloak, his tone casual. Seems that way. It is special, isn't it? I've been interested in it ever since I read the tales of Beedle the Bard. Never thought it actually existed. Thank you, Headmaster, I'll treasure it. Dumbledore's face was a mix of confusion and resignation. Who are you? Just a knight, doing his duty, Harry replied with a shrug. Wait, Dumbledore called, his voice faint but urgent. What will you do now? Harry paused and glanced back. I'm a knight always looking for thrilling battles. I'll be around. I get the sense that this country is heading for exciting times in the coming year. Oh, and do me a favor. Collect the other Deathly Hallows for me, will you? I know the cloak is with the Potters, and I'll claim it in time. As for the ring, I've no idea where it is, but I'll be back for it. Until then, goodbye. Without waiting for a reply, Harry disappeared into the forest, leaving Dumbledore alone in the clearing. He moved swiftly through the trees, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the scene of the battle. As he reached the forest's edge, Harry cast a final glance toward Hogwarts. The castle stood proudly against the golden hues of dawn, oblivious to the duel that had just transpired in the nearby woods. Until next time, he whispered. With that, he took to the skies. He avoided apparating immediately. Dumbledore was known to have ways of tracking apparition signatures, and Harry couldn't risk leading him to Black Castle. That would reveal far too much. After flying a considerable distance, Harry found a secluded spot where he finally apparated back to Black Castle. As he stepped into the familiar halls, the weariness of the night began to catch up with him. But despite his exhaustion, he couldn't help but smile. What a night, he murmured to himself as he prepared for some much-needed rest.
Thanks for listening.